Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Prathana.
Hi, hello, Prachi ma'am.
Hi.
Hello, Sunita. So good to see you all here.
It's a pleasure.
We'll just wait for a few more minutes and then we'll start. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. I think we are going to start. I'm sure people will join us soon. So before we begin, just a few rules. I think there are just a few of us so for now, but we will be putting this up in the chat box as well for the people who will join us a little later. So before we start, I would only like you to request to keep your mics and videos off while the conference is on, so that we can ensure consistent network for our speakers and presenters. If there are any comments or questions from you, please mention them using the chat feature and we will get to them if time permits. And there will be a 10 minutes break after the first panel discussion. So we start. I'm Prarthana Patil, Country Co-Director for Ni3 India. A very, very good afternoon to you all. I'm just going to take you through a very short brief on our journey so far. My colleague Bhanu Verma and I, on behalf of Bhanu Verma and I, I'm going to be talking about the 4 years in a very short brief. December 2nd, 2017, Bhanu Verma and I met a very warm group of people on a cold London morning. Little did we know then, these people and this project would become the reason for many changes within and without. I will forever be grateful to Mr. Siddharth Shani, who gave me an opportunity to be a part of this life-changing experience. I welcome you all with the same warmth to know us a little more. While the first trip to Huddersfield was overwhelming, so much information packed in a very short trip of 4 to 5 days, the actual meaning of all that information began to fine-tune our understanding of the project. Back in India, we met a few people we knew, our first stakeholders. The conversations helped us discover that all forms of violence against women were symptoms. The focus therefore shifted to the root cause, gender bias, fueled by the intergenerational influences of patriarchal thought in an Indian home, leading to gender-based violence. Our research fellow, Ms. Rukmini Banerjee, led us through a 2-year intense process of literature reviews, opening up several new thoughts around gender-based violence. Research assistant, Ms. Anne Panikkar, helped in reaching out to the juvenile homes. Interacting with those children will remain the most profound experience. Ms. Meg Sharma and Ms. Sunaina Wagmare, our media gathering team, got themselves trained in the expertise and ethics of collecting audio-video recordings, so critical for the project documentation. Ms. Ishani Kulkarni, who showed us as a student intern who contributed immensely to data visualization. We established the Design Hub, another outcome of the project headed by Sunaina Wagmare, giving us an opportunity to apply design skills to academic research, making it more accessible to the general public. Ms. Karmishta Krishna, our student volunteer from ISDI School of Design and Innovation, added immense value to the social media campaigns with her diverse skills and numerous other young people who joined us along our journey. And Gauri Pause, who joined us briefly, but gave us a fresh new perspective to think about. We conducted in-depth interviews and focus group discussions with men and women who shared their personal experiences, giving us a glimpse of real-life situations that helped feed into the final project outcome. Our next big hurdle was conducting the psychosocial surveys with school children. Though getting appointments for permissions and managing bureaucracy was stressful, the state government and municipal corporation were surprisingly helpful to push the project ahead right from the beginning. And we managed to reach more than 8,000 students in Mumbai itself. Connections we have made during the last 4 years will remain forever. So many ideas have come up, so many new proposals in line, few on hold, few rejected. But the learning that rejection does not mean failure has made us always look for the next opportunity. And it's always around the corner. It was hard hitting to realize when Bhanu as a father and I as a teacher, along with our own personal experiences as children, chalked out the narrative of the game. Decades-old stories held true even today to a large extent. The pandemic could have left us in low spirits. We had to cancel the game's trials. But being a part of the project has given us so much hope that nothing seems impossible. And we will be taking this up as a new project soon. At the Global Summit in 2019, our vision to see young people from each country take over the reins came true. June 2021, Play Talk Change, entirely conceptualized, conducted, and led by all the young members from each country, brought to light the possibilities that design, technology, research, and innovation can bring about. A year ago, I dreaded the day when the project would officially come to a close. But today I realize that within each of us who have been a part of this project is a seed that is ready to spring to life, a seed that will further the cause of Ni3 to end gender-based violence globally up until the time it's an absolute reality. Delays don't disrupt anymore. They only make us look at other avenues. The learnings cannot be quantified, but on behalf of the India team, I would like to share. If anything can leave you with hope, it is already successful. And with that, I would like to introduce you all to the acting director of Ni3. Dr. Nadia Wager is a reader in forensic psychology at the University of Huddersfield. She has been lecturing in forensic psychology and victimology for 20 years. She holds an extensive experience of researching gender-based violence and evaluating community interventions for victims of serious crimes, whilst working in partnership with those delivering the service. Dr. Wager, may I request you to address our audience today?
Thank you, Pradna. And it's a huge honor to be here and to have been invited to come along to your conference today. I've only been with Ni3 now. I've been loitering around for about a year and officially in post just over 9 months. And it is an amazing opportunity and experience to be part of this big group of people who are so committed to challenging gender-based violence. So I want to start really this afternoon, talking a little bit about gender-based violence, and then giving you a bit of an overview about the whole Global Challenges research funded project that this is part of. So gender-based violence is a global issue. It affects every country, and while it might manifest in different ways in different countries and at different periods across time, it's been there throughout history. And I was thinking this morning when I got up and was thinking about your conference today, about all the different ways it manifests. And I was thinking back to the witch hunts that we've had of women, the dunking of wives in the UK for being argumentative with their husbands. We've done such awful things to women and non-gender conforming men and children. So it is time that we challenge this. What we do know about gender-based violence, it very rarely occurs due to the individual's pathology or the pathology of the perpetrators. The perpetrators, by and large, actually are conforming to the norms and values of the society. They're not aberrant values that they're adopting that lead to their offending behaviour. And so the change that we need to actually instigate has to happen at a societal level. It's not individuals that we need to change, it's society. And there's no better way of doing that than actually helping young people develop pro-social ideals where actually we can start to eradicate gender inequality, which is the key driving force, as Pradna said, of gender-based violence. While we see one group of individuals as being inferior to another group of individuals, they're always going to be stigmatized, discriminated against, and we can commit atrocities against them. That we have to eradicate. Human beings are all equal, regardless of gender, ethnicity, or any other division that we might see. So the Ni3 aim, particularly with this GCRF project, has been about developing pro-social educational games for young people to change young people's ways of thinking so that they might challenge those around them. Young people are very good at challenging their parents and other adults when it comes to wanting to get people to see the right way of doing things. And you might not be aware of, in the UK, we have a master chef on TV called Jamie Oliver, who one of his things that he tried to do was to educate parents about good nutrition for children by educating the children so that they go back and educate their parents. And I think that's what we're doing at Ni3. As Pradna says, before we can develop the games, we need to do the research. We need to understand what are the ideologies and the driving forces behind gender-based violence in the countries we're working with. And with this GCRF project, India was part of 4 different countries that were working together. So there was India, Uganda, Jamaica and the UK, each working on a different form of gender-based violence. So within each country, surveys were done with young people, children and young people from age 9 up to 17. In total, over 30,000 young people were surveyed about their experiences of gender-based violence and forms of child abuse and their attitudes towards gender-based violence. That's a phenomenal undertaking to have reached that many young people in schools. Schools often quite resistant to us entering in, but we've done it. On top of that, we've done qualitative research. As Pradna said, there was interviews and focus groups with both people that have experienced gender-based violence or in some instances, those who have perpetrated it. Again, this gives us real insight into what is this experience like, and that really served as the backdrop for developing these digital games, the very immersive digital games, which young people are loving. At the moment, we're lucky enough to be running the game trial in the UK. Our first week is just coming to a close. And what we've been hearing from the school is the children are loving the game. They're shouting out as they're playing, angry at some of the characters, loving the other characters. And just this has got the power to actually engage young people's minds to want change. So as Pradna says, the project's been hampered in little ways by COVID. So the school closures have actually challenged us in being able to do the game trials across all 4 countries. However, Uganda managed to do theirs just before the lockdown hit. Their timing was impeccable. And the UK, we have just started out. It might be on a smaller scale than we'd anticipated. But I think we need to look to the future. We have submitted a grant application where we hope that we'll still be working with Jamaica and India, so that we can run those game trials. Games are up and ready. We've got wonderful curriculum documents that have been created by the teams with the help of Ni3, who's going to be talking to you hopefully later. It's a huge achievement what we've done in this time, and I feel very proud of it, even though I've just come in at this very late last minute. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of today and to really enjoy the conference and to hear what's been going on. So it's thank you from me, and I'll hand you back to Prarthana. The famous saying, you're on mute.
Unmute yourself.
I am sorry. Thank you so much, Nadia, and you're so right. We started off as 4 countries, and now we are 5 countries with Brazil added to it. And I think each of the countries' research focus has added to our own understanding of those issues, and we realize that those issues are not country specific, they are human specific. Wherever you find a group of people, you will find at least 1 or 2 or more issues which prevail. So yes, I think this is in the true sense a global project. On that note, I would like to now invite our research fellow Rukmini Banerjee to elaborate on the research that Ni3 has undertaken in the last 4 years. Over to you, Rukmini.
Hi, everyone. I am Rukmini. I am the research fellow for Ni3. And before I kind of start off, I just want to say that I have been, working with my Ni3 colleagues for more than, maybe 3.5, more than that, and it's like, it's a very bittersweet moment almost, and I'm not going to hide my emotions. And I feel very, very happy, and I feel very, very honored, that I can share this space and, give you a very short glimpse of what we have been up to in the last 3.5 years. So I will begin with a presentation on the most of the research activities that we have conducted. Here we go. I hope everyone can see this.
Yes, Rukmini.
All right, that's perfect. Perfect. All right. Okay, so we are going to talk about research to prevent gender-based violence, and we will talk a little bit about the methodologies and learnings from the qualitative and quantitative studies that we have conducted. So this is a brief overview of the following presentations. We will talk about our objectives, the scope of work, some brief introduction to gender bias, gender-based violence, the review in literature, the findings of our qualitative research, the results of our quantitative research. And finally, we will be talking a little bit about how we can see the 2 findings kind of correspond with each other, talk to each other. So let's start off. And so the main objectives that we want to pursue in this presentation is to understand that the research related work we have undertaken. We will also be talking about the approaches and some of the strategies that we used during this kind of mixed methods research. Then we will try to analyze the results and findings of the literature review as well as the empirical research studies that were conducted. We want to see and identify some commonality of issues that have emerged across all of these studies that we have undertaken. And finally, we want to highlight some of the conversations and that can happen based on the research that we have done, based on the evidence that we have created, and subsequently how we can think about possibilities for the ending of research projects, and maybe sustainable understanding, how to take this forward, even though these are time bound, how to take this forward. So these are some of the issues that we will be discussing. To begin with, here is a snapshot of our center's mission and vision. So numbers have told us that globally it's 1 in 3 women who actually face some form of abuse during their lifetime, and our hope is to kind of make this number absolutely none in 3, and we want to do this by kind of innovative intervention methods using technology and evidence-based research. But actually, most importantly, we understand that research is really not a very solitary endeavor, and it is through a very multidisciplinary kind of collaborative approach we can address systemic and structural drivers of GBV. Only that is possible with collaboration with other people, with stakeholders, and youth. So that is our main mission. So I would say that we all know that GBV is, as Nadia already said, it's a global issue, but we also know that in India, GBV is extremely rampant. There are news reports, policy documents, legislation, and even gender knowledge that can confirm that if you are a woman, you will be facing some kind of violence at some point of time in your life, which is terrifying, but also extremely true. In fact, GBV is something that occurs throughout the lifespan of women, right from a very young age. There is maltreatment, child marriages, to adolescence when there is misinformation and repression, then on to adulthood when we see women are forced to play out their traditional and expected gender roles, and finally even in at the old age when abuse and trauma completely take a different perspective, a different turn. And in this situation, we see that traditional gender roles are perpetuated by society through culture and belief systems. And the socialization of women is so profound that they often accept that GBV is something inevitable, and they need to accept it because they have been born as women. And GBV is something that happens to everyone. It happens to people from different social locations, but it's also true that different women do not find it easy to seek help for reasons of family respect and lack of structural support. They do not find it easy to seek help, or even try to resist the violence that they are facing. But it is safe to say that there are still people who are very actively resisting GBV, especially we saw that younger women find it very hard to accept the everydayness of gender-based violence in their lives. And the only problem is that even with much funding and policy development, the situation in India is slow to change, and women are constantly negotiating violence. This is, of course, leading to widespread discontentment towards the government, but we are still hopeful that with continued support of civil societies and educators, we can get to the core of this issue. Now we come to the issue of gender bias in India, which is also a focus of one of the focus concepts of our India Center. So gender bias is comparatively a new concept that explains the phenomenon of discrimination of one gender over another. So, when we began our project in December 2017, we found that underlying the issues of gender-based violence is also acceptance and transmission of traditional gender roles. And here you can see that we have listed some of the ways in which we have found gender bias manifesting and proliferating across the country. Firstly, we see son preference and daughter aversion, which go hand in hand. Son preference and daughter aversion can lead to abortion of female fetuses, increase in family sizes, even with limited resources, unequal distribution and allocation of resources within the home, and maltreatment and violence towards the girl child. Alongside dowry, child marriage, forced marriages are also outcomes of the secondary status given to young girls and women. Women are considered as investments and belonging to families they will eventually marry. So, and this is not even the end. There is also gender bias that we see in education and textbooks. So many parents actually fear that going to school might tarnish the family's reputation, as the girl might, end up doing something undesirable. And alongside, we also see that there is rampant harassment by teachers as well as peers on young girls, which prevent them from feeling safe at school, and maybe result in a lot of dropouts. So and basically the situation with gender stereotypes in school books in India have also received not a lot of attention. But we see that in textbooks as well, as we have found in our research, there's a lot of stereotypical gender roles which are represented, and children read it and they understand it, and there is no end to this transmission. And finally, the way our households function actually show that women are very unequally burdened over with the responsibilities that should ideally be shared. So for instance, family planning continues to be on the shoulders of women, which is definitely problematic, but it's still rampant and it's there in India. On the right side, you see a little quote from one of our participants, Anushka. She is a young girl, and I think she succinctly kind of puts together the idea of gender bias in India. Now comes the interesting part where we tried to kind of do the linking of gender bias and GBV. So the numbers on the screen actually kind of give a very sad visual of what is the situation at hand. So, and in order to understand this very high levels of gender-based violence in India, we have to go do a deep dive into what is the social fabric and question exactly the kinds of behaviors that actually lead to this number. And gender bias here is a frame of reference we use to explain the proliferation of violence. And it is finally actually an outcome of a combination of factors, including traditional gender roles and transmission of that, patriarchal construction of masculinity, opposing femininity, intergenerational violence and bias. And along with technology, this has become the foundation of gender-based violence proliferation in India. And that is why we considered that looking at gender bias and gender-based violence together is perhaps a good approach. And now we come to the first literature review that we had conducted, and this is to complicate the necessary correlation of gender-based violence and gender bias. We took a very lengthy systematic review of available literature. And we came up with a model that you can see on the left side of the several ways gender bias and gender-based violence connect and actually harm women across their lifespan. With guidance, with guidance from Ni3 UK, especially Dr. Tim Gomersel, we conducted that. We concluded that there are 4 types of double standards or biases that were prevalent in India. First is sexual bias, double standards, then is a domestic bias and double standards, then economic bias and double standards, and finally institutional bias and double standards. And women face double standards, but we also understood that they also resist bias and gender-based violence in their own ways, and this was another very important outcome for us. Then we come to the qualitative research. I'm just going to, because we all know more or less we know the details. We had extensive research, fieldwork in November 2018, and we collected data through IDIs and FGDs. And the outcome of this research study is a report with a set of recommendations that can address the issue of gender bias and gender-based violence in India. This report is available for sharing. We have, if you want, we can put up the link in the chat box for this. So now we come to the findings of the qualitative study. These are basically the different kinds of overarching findings that we focused on in the report. So first is, when we are reimagining gender roles, that is absolutely necessary for us to kind of envision any sort of intervention strategy. If we don't think about reimagining gender roles, it will be really impossible for us to consider that women are living extremely difficult lives, and give them the kind of support that they need. And then we see abuse has different manifestations and meanings. Transmission of negative gender bias through institutions. We already know that families, even educational institutes, they are biased. We see that violent relationships do not always have very simple, solutions, and it's not easy to give the help that people need and then expect everything to be all right, because violence is something complicated, and violent relationships are even more complicated, actually. And then we see that women's lives are controlled in very covert ways. Along with physical, emotional, psychological violence, women are also controlled very differently by different parties. Sometimes we have seen that even children who are otherwise, can contribute to women's survivors' help-seeking behavior. They can also be actually, the reason for many of them to not leave their spaces of abuse. We also see that we need to do a really robust unsilencing of women's narratives. Women should be allowed to speak up about abuse, should be given the kind of support that they need, especially from formal systems. And we found that most of the women survivors whom we spoke to were dissatisfied with the responses from the institutions or from the agencies that they had approached. So really rethinking about the kind of support that we need to give. And finally, and most importantly, gender-based interventions focusing equally on men and women is absolutely essential, because however important it is for women to know that they are, they can change their situation, it is also equally important for men to know that they can also help, and they should help when they see violence, when they speak up against violence. Then we conducted our quantitative research, and this was in 2019. We had a large-scale psychosocial survey with school students. The main objective was to understand how young people in India are experiencing maltreatment and abuse, and whether and how that affected their mental health. So we had 8,365 children participating in this. And it was a really interesting journey, and we learned a lot. And in fact, we collaborated with many people, and for which we are extremely grateful for all the support that was required. Now I will quickly talk about the results. And so you see that the results of the survey give a very complicated picture. It was found that maltreatment within the home as well as outside the home was very high. However, this was actually in line with several other studies conducted before. Exposure to violence within the home was also very high, meaning that the young people who participated in the study witnessed very regular violence at home. This is quite concerning for all of us who are working to end violence against women and children. Then we see that both boys and girls were adversely impacted by the violence that they were witnessing or facing, which was leading to considerable problems with their mental health. Empathy was present in both boys and girls, but girls were slightly more empathetic, both cognitive and affective, than boys towards victims of interpersonal violence. I'm just going to present the findings. We can talk about this later, what this means. And and finally, when we were asked, when the questions were asked about traditional gender roles, we saw that both boys and girls equally endorsing traditional gender roles. Now, these numbers that you see here are just a glimpse into the results of our survey, and our final survey report will give a much more nuanced perspective to the numbers we see here. So now that I have presented most of the findings and evidence, I want to talk a little bit about how these kind of are almost interacting. So the qualitative studies and the quantitative studies are studies with, it's almost conversational, you know. And the whole point of our mixed methods research approach was to get an amplified and very diverse explanation to the issue of gender-based violence. And you can see here that the high rates of maltreatment, first is you can see here the high rates of maltreatment within the home of children can perhaps be justified if we understand that abuse and neglect are very covert and have different types of manifestations. And really, to put a stop to this, we first need to understand all the overt and covert types of issues that people are facing, especially young people, but not limited to young people. Then we see that unlike previous studies, we see that boys are perhaps more likely to face maltreatment than previously accepted and evidenced. It was clear that when we are thinking of maltreatment, we have to include experiences of boys as well. And the way to substantiate this kind of a statistic would be to question why interventions on gender-based violence should be focusing on all genders equally, but with tactical differences. So unless traditional gender roles that suggest males are less likely to face violence because of their superior gender is questioned, young boys will continue to suffer as well. Then we see that when it comes to mental health, both boys and girls are similarly likely to report adverse mental health outcomes, ranging from self-harm, anxiety, depression to suicide-related issues. And from our qualitative study, we found that when violence is rampant and accepted, we cannot expect it to have very simple outcomes. It affects different people, including young people who then have difficulties with coping, stress. So, the idea is to be able to understand that when we are creating and considering interventions, all the parties affected is crucial, especially if young children are also involved. So many of the women from our qualitative studies were very dissatisfied with the help that they got, and including a lack of awareness around mental health and how to you know get counseling. And so really the idea is that once the formal systems are uh, working hand in hand with the researchers, with the implementers, with the policymakers, that is when we can actually see great impact and change this bad statistic of mental health outcomes and disproportionately affecting young people who are facing violence. And then we see that girls reported a higher level of empathy than boys. This may not come as a very big surprise to some of us, but that itself is actually an outcome of gendered stereotype. Something like, girls are more emotional, more understanding this than boys. But the truth is that this ability of young girls to empathize with survivors is extremely important for us who consider solidarity as a very important kind of factor that can mobilize and as well as sustain social change. So primarily, if you're focusing on solidarity of women, giving importance to women's stories of resilience, this can actually contribute in help seeking for survivors. And especially if children are more aware of the situation, especially the girl child, when she is more aware of the situation and is given the kind of support and knowledge, they can actually become change makers. And finally, we see that traditional gender roles are impacting lives of young girls and boys equally. Therefore, recognizing the ways in which women are controlled socially, culturally, economically, can actually give a sense of how to resist these forms of control as well. Similarly, addressing the fact that gender roles are easy to believe in, especially because of the different institutions like family, education, marriage, are all consciously as well as subconsciously promoting gender bias and gender-based violence. Basically, to wrap it up, the qualitative and the quantitative research are presenting almost two interconnected versions of the problem of gender bias that is leading to gender-based violence. And here we have listed down some of the discussion topics that future researchers and activists can consider. What is the idea of sustainable help giving for projects that are time bound, especially when we see that legislation and government policy and support is not enough. What are academics and researchers to do to provide the support for participants who have been included in the studies? And how can we improve upon the idea of systemic gender bias across institutions like family, education, governance, with help of technology, which is also interesting because it's an important starting point to reimagine awareness generation, awareness creation with help of technology, because technology is around us everywhere now. And finally, what kind of alliances can be formed across groups, collectives, communities to encourage minority persons' well-being? And this last point is something that will flow into our next conversation, where we will engage with all the collaborators who have helped in making this project successful and who will give us their views on the ways we can bridge differences and build alliances. These are the references, and thank you everyone for listening in. I hope I have not exceeded the...
Thank you so much, Rukmini. I think this was wonderful. No, I'm sure we have all required this kind of a reminder of everything that we have done, of course, but also what it has led us to, the findings. I think it's once again overwhelming to see everything in a nutshell. So thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you, Pratna.
We'll move on to the next session. The idea of a society that is free of gender discrimination and violence, too, may seem difficult to achieve today. But it's only through consistent efforts, discussions, courage, and perseverance that all impossible tasks have been made possible, and so will this. It is not just an utopian dream. We want to actualize gender equality. Ni3, the global research project, dared to become a part of this journey to end gender-based violence across the globe. Through research, yes, but by aiming to leave behind tools, possibilities for the youth to take charge in becoming a part of the change. And when the youth steps up, change is inevitable. Research projects that are collaborative in nature are important and useful because they consider several stakeholders from different perspectives. We see collaboration as a way to model and promote inclusive values in our scholarship and in this competitive and individualistic culture of the society. This project would never have been smooth sailing if our partners and collaborators did not believe in our cause. And because of this similarity, we propose that the collaborative work can carry forward the conversation of social change by including experiences and perspectives of all the people who contributed even after the closure of this specific project. We have with us today 3 important stakeholders who have contributed to society with their dedicated involvement with young people and have also supported our research project. Joyce ma'am was the principal at St. Thomas Mar Thoma School, Malad East from 2004 to 2020. For her teaching is her passion and not her profession. She can walk up to any extra lengths to make her passion a memorable one and fruitful to her students. She believes physical and mental health should go together if we want to mold and shape a child. Next, we have Sunita George, principal at Bombay Scottish School, Mahim. Sunita is a postgraduate in school administration, a certified trainer for digital citizenship, and a master trainer for adolescents education program with 26 years of experience in teaching and administration. Through her initiative, Digital Safety for Youth, which I absolutely love, she has been working towards empowering the youth to think critically and behave safely in the digital world. She has received several accolades for her leadership and as a change maker. And last but not the least is Ishani Kulkarni. Ishani is a communication designer with a keen interest in using design for social good in impactful ways. Her work with Ni3 includes visualizing research data to further the understanding of gender bias and gender-based violence, in addition to branding and social media efforts. Although her specific interests lie in gender and climatic changes and justice, she believes that no social issue exists in isolation and co-runs THIS, thisdesign.in, a design practice focused on social impact through collaboration. Welcome to all of you. And I'm so happy to see you all here. The last we met was another panel discussion a few years ago. And now we have some interesting conversations to follow up with. So my first question to all of you, starting with you, Joyce, ma'am, is how did this research, the Ni3 research, impact you in your work or profession, or even in your personal space?
Good evening, ma'am. I'm happy to join this discussion. First of all, I would like to say the research which they have conducted is something very unique, which is different from the rest of the researches which we had in our school. The people who are come to they come to conduct the research, they really interacted with the students, try to go little more deep into to find out actually what are their problems, to help them to find out, to clarify their doubts and all those. So that gave the children which helped the students to open up. So a big thank you to the people who conducted the survey. Okay. Second, after this survey, the one particular thing which I noticed is, since they were not asked to write the names, it was, the way they conducted the survey was something very impressive to me. And the students, they really opened up themselves, what was in their heart, they opened up. And after the survey, I found quite a lot of changes in these children, because if I say this, it may be you may find it something very strange, I should say, because my school is located in the midst of a slum with 95% Muslim community and 5% Hindu community. So for us, when we started the school, I should say we had only 10 girls in the school. So I was listening to your conversation, and I found that, gender biased and gender based, all this, we had to literally go to their house to motivate the parents to send their children for education. So in the long run, we found, it is not easy for us to go to their houses, and also we started adult education for the parents, so that the parents can be trained, taught, and that is the way we start to create awareness that girls should come out of the house, they should start studying. And two, three things which I have noticed after this survey is, children, they start to approach directly to the school counselor, and they start to express, their anxiety, their worry, their fear, which was in their heart since long time. Because it is very difficult for these children to trust the teachers, because they have a fear within themselves that, if I tell my teachers, tomorrow she may say, speak it out to somebody, or she may show partiality, or she may, what she will think. So these are the lot of fears which the children had. And they start to go to the counselors, they start to clear out their doubts, they start to improve the performance in the classroom, that is improved. Second thing is, they start to I should say freely, not 100%, but at least they start to freely interact with the boys in the classrooms. Otherwise, it was told to them that you should not talk to boys, you should keep a distance from them and all. But a kind, um, the fear they have taken out. So I think children, their anxiety level has come down, their fear has reduced, and they became little more open. And I suggest such type of surveys should be conducted more with a personal touch. So I think lot we can do.
Thank you so much, Joyce ma'am. And you're so right. I mean, we had such a tough time actually putting the survey together. It was emotional even when we were putting the questions together. But Sunita, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pratna, for having me here. And I think so. While I attended the last session which we had, and though I have not been as much a part of the entire process, but I too am feeling a bit nostalgic today because I remember how we had a conversation, and I didn't know at that time that you were working on something like this, and we just connected over a casual conversation on gender bias, and that's how I was on the panel last time, and it's really nice to be back. I think researchers like this particularly help in creating awareness amongst educators, because a lot of times we as teachers or school leaders, we are doing certain things in a certain way because that has been the status quo, right? So a lot of times, even in schools like ours, which fortunately we are in urban school, and we have equal number of girls and boys almost in the classrooms, but that is not a true indicator of gender equality. I mean, there are a lot of gendered practices even in the classrooms. And even last time when I was there I had in fact carried with me a few sample of textbooks to materials we had, it's glaring on right on our face that these are the kind of things. But one thing that we all have to understand, that at the end of the day, when we talk about teachers, they too are product of the society. So a lot of times, they are gendered individuals. So if we are looking at creating a gender inclusive education, then I think it's most important that our teachers, the attitude of our teachers are aligned with it, right? So I think researchers like this really help in that uh, uh, area. So indirectly, once a teacher is empowered with the right kind of tools and strategies, only then is it possible to have create gender inclusive learning environments, whether it is classrooms, school, clubs, anywhere and everywhere. So it not just affects the classrooms, but it generally affects socialization in school, the social experience of schooling, the textbooks, curriculum, worksheets, the entire educational practice. So I think that's how researchers like this will really, really help, schools like ours, as well as schools like where Joyce ma'am is working currently. I think it's going to impact all of us eventually. It's a very intangible, and it may not be a very visible transformation, but transformation is happening. And there are a lot of things which I have personally experienced. So when I change, I do carry that. It is contagious, and the entire culture changes. So definitely researchers like this, these are very, very important.
Thank you, Sunita. You're absolutely right. And I think what Joyce ma'am also said, we did share it with our global team, and I think we will definitely take actions on that soon. But Sunita say, adding to that point, that when we become the change, when something changes within, it's so contagious, and it kind of, it just spreads. And I think as a teacher, I can completely relate to both of you, what you're saying. And on that note, I think I'm going to move to Ishani, who has also been my student, and she has been a colleague and a very good friend. So Ishani, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening to everybody. I think Joyce ma'am and Sunita ma'am has made such valuable points before me, and I feel like my perspective is going to come from the other side of things. It's I also feel a little bit emotional, I think, being here at the end of our project, because we have managed to do so much. And especially hearing Joyce ma'am talk about sort of the impact that the survey might have had, because I was part of the team that did the survey there. So I could really connect to that. And it makes me so happy to hear that that's a development that's happening. And I think in terms of sort of what the impact the research has had on me and my personal life as a designer, I didn't come into this project with the same understanding of the issue that most of the other team did, especially those coming from the academic background. So I think for me, as a young person and as a designer, it's really sort of opened up my worldview, and I've gotten to learn so much more. And things that sort of have always been around me, but I hadn't taken the time to notice, maybe a lot like what Sunita ma'am you had done with the textbook questions. I think those had left such an impact, because it's something that we all grew up with, but we didn't realize what it might have meant. So yeah, I think it's definitely sort of inculcated that feminist lens in me almost, and it's something that I carry with me through all of the work that I do now.
Wow, that's interesting, Ishani. And I think in some time, I'm also going to ask you about your future plans, because it's very interesting what she wants to do. And it's amazing to see how young people are trying out different avenues to apply their learnings and, whatever they have become over a period of this whole education journey. But on Joyce, ma'am, I would like to ask you one specific question in terms of the kind of students you have experienced in your last so many years. Is how do you see them shape their future? How do you see them looking forward to a future, and how do you think that a project like ours or a survey like what we did can impact that kind of thinking and help them actually realize that being in school is also helpful?
I would like to say, project, of course, it helps. But the main thing is the attitude of the people who come to conduct the survey. If they are coming just for the sake of finishing up their work, that project is not going to bring any results. So they just do the work, they get the whatever the children write, they are not bothered whether they are returned or not returned. They finished their survey, they went back. But here, what I have noticed, I'm a person who I observe things very minutely, because for me, when I started working in this school, these are the children who never used to wear, proper clothes. They were in burqas. They never used to come out. So visiting the houses, making them understand. So we had done a lot of basic works. And plus, when these people came, but we are not professional people to conduct psychological surveys or analysis or anything. And we did not have that much research at that time to appoint a counselor or anybody. But when these children, I think it's a God-given opportunity. When these people came, their attitude was the perfect one, the right attitude. You should be approachable to the students. If the team which is conducting any survey, if they have a right attitude, right approach to the students, the children feel free to come and ask, they clear their doubts. Otherwise, they get very scared. They write, if they know they write something. If they don't know, they won't write. Second, the team has created a kind of interest. It's the second thing. Third thing which I have seen is they motivated the students, made them understand, you don't need to write the names. It is not going to be, gave them the assurance that this is going to help you in the future. So this all depends upon how the team, which conducts the survey, motivates the students. The attitude, the approach which they take, that is what is more important. And for me, from 100, when I joined with 144 students, with the 10 girls, it has gone to 2000 in no time, with more 60-40. And we are growing, the parents became educated. We have even students who have gone for high studies abroad. See, today when we look back, and I think lot of things are taken place. But unfortunately, after the survey, I wanted to do lot of things for the students, but it's sad that because of the lockdown, my 5-6 months are wasted, and then it was time for me to retire. But if you really want to change the society, you should conduct this type of surveys mostly in schools which are based on slums, and where the children, they have no one to talk to, they have no one to listen to. They have live in one small, it is, I don't even say huts. There are so many people who are staying in that, they have no privacy, uneducated parents. So these all gender bias and gender based, all these violence, this the birthplace is their own home. So if you want to change, educators can change. You create awareness in the students, and organize this type of campaigns, so the children will be able to open up, give them training, and then give them the courage. Like anything happens, you should have they encourage them to stand up. If anything happens, you should stand up and you should speak. Nothing is going to happen to you. So I have made my children, I should say, the end of my career, I think I made them little bold and strong. I used to tell them that you don't need to be, because the parents used to say, ma'am, that's girl, no, it's okay, she has to get married and go, even if she doesn't study, it's all right. I said, in my school, if the girls are more important than the boys, I should say. But gradually, the parents have, I should say, at least quite a lot of parents have changed there. They start to educate their children. We start to create, job-oriented courses. So they start, the children start to come out of their places. So this type of awareness program should be conducted in a regular basis with the people who are really motivated and having a right attitude. So I feel at the end, education is the only one thing which can change this. If your educators are strong, and if they are changed, if they can make a difference in the society, this is what I should say.
Thank you so much. That was very, very heartening to hear, Joyce ma'am. And I think I can only imagine the richness of your experience with these children. And as you shared, I once again realize that sometimes it's, one should not underestimate the power of education
Correct.
and people's connections in the classroom. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Sunita, you have been working with young people and you have been working in a very innovative manner. You have brought in the whole digital literacy in place. And I used to follow a lot of posts on Instagram, and your students used to put up, and I think and I used to always share it with my students in the class. So I think this whole chain of, the domino effect of when I hear something from another person, and then I take it back to my design students and say, why don't you guys take inspiration from that? What have your interventions specifically on gender, eradicating gender bias in the school? Because I'm sure you may be experiencing that at different age levels as well, and also different class levels of the society. So what are your views on that, and what have your strategies been?
So I think the kind of gender bias that our students or our homes experience are probably different from what Joyce ma'am just mentioned. But there is definitely gender bias. So I'll give you very small, simple examples in which I think some of this I shared last time also. That when I came in and when we were talking about this, I actually checked on how many when the children are taken on the ground, who stands first in the line, whether it's boys or girls, whether when it is distributing the footballs or basketballs, and who gets it first. So, conversations like this had never happened in schools, because when we talk about gender issues, we talk about big gender issues where we're talking about we're talking about violence, we're talking about the underprivileged section of the society. So one thing that I have managed to do, and I can say that proudly, I mean, you can, even if I wish my students were listening to this, is that when they talk about empowerment, I have started to bring in the concept that it's not women empowerment alone, stand alone. So it's not, because we are all victims of stereotypes. It's not one gender over the other. So we've had this platform called Perspective 360, where we've opened up, we've allowed children to talk up. So whenever they say we'll do a discussion on women empowerment. I said, no, we'll do a discussion on gender stereotypes, because it all stems from there, because it's not that. So I find a lot of these stereotypes impacting adversely, not just girls, but also boys. So one thing I think we've managed to do as a school is today, when my students talk about it, they don't talk about, in isolation, that in rural areas, these happen, they're more reflecting within, they're more reflecting practices at home. They're more talking about what happens in school. So I think that's one kind of conversation which I have managed to change, at every level. Secondly, what we have done is, I think after I went back, we, the last time, and I did do that presentation, and we had it with the teachers. And after that, whether it's a worksheet, whether it is a content that we are developing, we are very, very conscious as a school that we do not endorse any kind of gender stereotypes or gender bias. So I think that's something which has definitely happened in the last 2 to 3 years. I can say that. So a lot of these, and I'm sure when today we talk about issues, and we're very careful about what are we using. So for example, even when I speak, when I give my speeches, I say men and women. I don't say men and women anymore. I mean, and there are times when students do correct me also if I do that. So I think that kind of awareness is extremely important to reflect, because whenever we talk about gender stereotype, gender bias, we are always talking about the underprivileged section of the society. We're not talking about what's happening in our homes. So even conversations like, does your brother get to stay out late, whereas you don't? And so does that happen, and why does that happen, and how can that be corrected, and how do you go back to your parent and have this conversation with your parent? I think that's something that has definitely impacted. So there is a huge change, I can tell you, in the last 2 to 3 years. And I would really thank you for having me on the panel last time, because while I have been very vocal about it, but I mean, kind of to reflect what happens every day in our schools, in our classrooms, at our homes, I think that I have managed to bring in.
Thank you, Sunita. Yes, and I do remember our conversations at the airport, and it had changed the way I also look at the possibilities of, bringing those conversations. And I think you had mentioned something very beautiful to me then, saying that, I've kept my cabin doors always open to my students, and if they ever want to pick up a topic and come and speak, they are most welcome. And I'll never forget that. I think I try and bring that. I mean, I always believe that I do that, but now I'm more verbal about it. Now I make it a more conversational.
Yes. And in fact, Pratna, after we spoke last time in the virtual space, I think that platform has picked up so beautifully. We're calling it Perspective 360. So we've taken everything from LGBT cure to anything. I mean, there's nothing which you can say that cannot be taken in a school setup. Our entire approach is bring it on. So I think that has happened definitely. And in virtual space, I cannot tell you how exciting these Perspective 360 sessions have become, and how children are looking forward to that, because that's one platform where they're allowed to express themselves. They are allowed to contradict somebody else and put in their point of view. They're allowed to say that, no, ma'am, I don't agree with you because of XYZ. And, I feel like this about it, and everybody's allowed to. So that kind of tolerance is building in, which is, I think, a basic ground setting for emotional well-being. So that we've managed to definitely do.
Thanks, Sunita. And I'm really, once again, looking forward to visiting your school and maybe being a part of that conversation someday. And probably, Joyce, ma'am, I think you would love to also join us to see, and I would love to come and see what your children are doing. I'm sure that is a possibility. But Ishani, you are the youngest on this panel. but you have done some groundbreaking work while you were with us. I want to know your future endeavors. I know you want to do, you want to get, and this is something which is still new to me, and I'm still, not completely sure I'm making sense. But you talk about climate justice, and you were working with us in gender bias and gender-based violence. How do you see this work coming together? Do you see a possibility of the learnings and the findings from um, this project, on whatever little time that you worked with us, impacting your future work?
Absolutely. I think that's my short answer for it. Is a big yes. But to go a little bit deeper, in something specific that I can talk about is actually, like you mentioned, the Play Talk Change conference that we did earlier in the year. Part of that conference, not the day itself, but in the run up to it, we actually produced 2 podcasts. One of them was about bringing out stories of gender bias and gender-based violence from within the Indian families. It's called Hamare Family Mein. It's where sort of each of us sat down with a grandparent and talked about what their experience was like growing up, and their sort of stories about gender bias versus how things have changed with our generation. And another one was I Am, which was really just about showcasing young people's resilience, specifically with regards to gender-based violence. So their experiences with them, and how they've overcome, and what they'd like to say to other young people like them and the adults in the room. And it makes me really happy to say that both were received so well. And we also got so much good feedback from the people that were participating with us in the podcast, that particularly with I Am. And the team and I are working really hard to ensure that I Am continues to live on. So we're working on figuring out how to make sure that we continue to produce the podcast. We're able to tell more stories of young people, and we're also, along with that, able to really provide a platform that can support all of that. Since you also mentioned sort of gender and climate justice, in terms of the larger picture, I think, one of the most important things about understanding gender rights or even feminism, I think, is intersectionalism. And it's part of, I think, what you said in my bio as well, which is realizing that nothing sort of exists in isolation. And your gender is sort of, it's part of your social location, and it's part of what will define how you're impacted by other issues, including climate crisis. It does not equally impact people of all genders. And that is an important fact to think about when we're sort of thinking about climate action and how to mitigate disasters that may be coming. And that's not just limited to climate action, right? It's limited to it goes on to everything. For example, right now, one of the projects that this is working on is with pastoral communities of India. And even there, there is that lens of gender and sort of what are women's rights in that situation, how are gender roles in these communities, because they're not the same as those in urban households. So it's very interesting, I think, for that lens to come out in all of these different places, and to see really how we can make a difference, especially, I think, from both my background as a designer and what I've learned being at Ni3. And I think in terms of the long term, I think the vision is definitely to sort of grow this into a larger team, have it be something that's much more collaborative, the same way that Ni3, despite being a research center, really just opened up for us designers and to bring in the different lens. I think that's something that I want to do as well.
Thanks, Ishani. I think I will continue to have a conversation with you on this to get my head around how you're talking, how you're approaching, because this is still new to me, and it's always heartening to hear it from students. And when a teacher is kind of taken aback with the choices that they make, it's always, that the future is in good hands. Thank you, Ishani, for that. Joyce ma'am, a very specific question to you, because I'm sure, it's not just the, adult learning that you had to do and the parent teaching that you had to do at the beginning. But, how has the government or the government schemes and policies been successful in helping you prevent gender bias or gender-based violence, over the years? If you can give us some glimpse on your experience of that.
See, ma'am, if you ask me that government comes out with many types of lucrative offers, like, but hardly anything is implemented. If you want to implement something in your school, you need to find out a way to get things done. See, for example, if you like, since our children are very poor and they had nothing to eat during recess, not an aided school or anything, and we have to find out a sponsor to, like, we had asked, like, in the sense, means offered many people from the political level, this level, and all, but it's the offer or the help comes very late. If you want to do something, you need to find out. You should be strong enough to find out. You should be confident. You should find ways to go out of your way to get help or find help and help the students. So if you are depending on governments, that government will do everything. My personal suggestion is, by the time your hair will turn all gray. This is what I feel or what I experienced. But yes, private parties, you get help beforehand. So more and more private parties, they should play, they should take initiative. And I would like to say one more thing, ma'am, that is regarding the project C. I would like people like you to conduct this type of not only service, motivational speech to the teachers, the educators. So, because if I am tortured at home, I will be going to the school with that mind. So now that frustration, that anger, I will be taking it up my students. So the teacher should be given help. They should be taught. They are the people. They are the torch bearers. They are the people who are going to remove, the tension from the children, guide the children. So teachers, more and more sessions should be talks like this type of debates or seminars or this type conducted with the teachers. And I feel if teachers have the right, I still believe if education is the only way which this type of gender based violence and gender bias, if you want to change, you know people with good education, good knowledge. No, children should be taught this is what, this is what. So I have seen my own children when they grown up, how they have turned out to be. They are all wonderful flowers today in front of me. So the teachers, your concentration should be more on schools, especially because big schools, what happens, there are problems, but that's not shown, that's not visible. It is hidden somewhere below the and under the blanket. But in this type of schools where it's very clearly can see, because in the initial days I have seen children when they get tensed up, they take the blade, they cut the teachers, they cut the students. So
I think we lost Joyce ma'am for a bit. Okay, till she connects back, I think I just wanted to add, Sunita, I mean, you'll be very happy to know that the pro-social video game that we are finally, almost ready with does have a supportive curriculum which empowers the teachers. And it helps teachers bring in these kind of conversations which, you bring into your students. So every and I think even Joyce ma'am will really appreciate this fact that, it's not just about the children now. We have to look at it as a combination. You have to look at it as a partnership between the faculty and the students. So, and empowerment is not something which can be given. Empowerment is something which is within us. It just needs to be realized. So Sunita, what you're doing with those conversations, and Ishani, what you are doing with those events, and I think Sunita, you should, Ishani, I think you should reach out to Sunita ma'am and, share with her your work as well, because I'm sure there will be some form of collaboration, of course, along with Joyce ma'am, and I'm hoping that she can join us very soon. But I just wanted to end on this note that it's very heartening to see that changes are being made at an individual level, because that is what will take us to a global level. It cannot it cannot be dependent on a group or an organization or a research project, like Sunita said. Yes, we do have findings. Yes, we do have contributions to make. But I remember Prachi ma'am, when we met Mrs. Prachi Sathe at the government, at the government office, and when she heard we had a very small window to share with her what this research was all about. This was right at the beginning of the project, and the only thing she asked, I think her eyes just lit up when we said that the outcome is a pro-social video game which will be played in the classrooms and which will be made available to the classrooms as a free resource, along with the support to the teachers in terms of how to conduct it. So I think and that's it. I think that was the beginning of our support from the government. So to Joyce ma'am, I think the only thing I would like to say is that help is always there, but yes, we have to take the responsibility to also give possibilities and outcomes to that research, and I think that is what we have tried to do. Thank you, Sunita. Thank you, Ishani, so much for this. Thank you, Joyce ma'am. And I'm going to now hand this over to Anne.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Hi. Hello, everyone. So we'll just take a 5-minute break, and then I will be coming back with the next panel discussion along with our co-moderator, with my co-moderator, Dr. Preeti Chopra. Right. So 5-minute break. Let's all be back by 5:55. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
And I'm in reverse. I don't know what to do. Hi, Banu. How are you?
Hello.
Preeti, we can
Hi,
see it.
yes.
We can see it straight. Don't worry. It's a technical issue. So if you just change the mirror view on your video, it should help. You will also be able to see it straight. But we can see it straight. Don't worry.
Okay.
And if you're there, I think we should start the session.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back from the break. I'm an senior research assistant at Ni3 India, and I will be moderating this next session with Dr. Preeti Chopra. With this particular panel discussion, we wanted to bring in perspectives from experts on how to influence policy making, use of research data, and especially with a focus on developing education policy to address gender bias and gender-based violence. With the previous panel discussion, the previous focus on education, I think this would be good to take this forward. With us, we have Dr. Preeti Chopra, who is a program leader for the International Postgraduate Certificate in Education and a senior lecturer in Education and Childhood and Youth Studies in the School of Education at the University of Greenwich. Preeti leads the Ni3 Research Center project development of anti-violence curricula for secondary schools in Jamaica, Uganda, India, and the UK, and is the co-moderator. Mrs. Prachi Sathe is an academic counselor. She first worked as an assistant teacher in SATE GH school for 18 years. She further went on to work as an officer on special duty with ex-education minister of Maharashtra. She has played an active role in policy decisions like textbook reforms, Shikshanachi Vari, teacher trainings, and has given paper presentations at international conferences. She also has her own YouTube channel under the name of Prachi Ravindra. She was instrumental in us getting our memorandum of understanding with the government to conduct psychosocial surveys at 20 schools in Mumbai. Advocate Veena Gowda, lawyer, Bombay High Court, is a women's rights lawyer who has been practicing in Mumbai. A graduate of the National Law School of India University, she presently heads a team of lawyers working exclusively on women's legal rights such as domestic violence, sexual harassment at the workplace, sexual abuse, and property rights. She also teaches a course titled Engendering Law and Justice at the Tata Institute of Social Science. And finally, Vandita Morarka. She is a human rights lawyer, activist, and researcher. She is the founder and CEO of One Future Collective. Before we commence with the panel discussion, Dr. Preeti Chopra, who is the co-moderator of this session, will be giving a small brief on what exactly is the curriculum that we are talking about. So she will, the curriculum framework that she has created, and then we will move on to the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you so much for your really lovely introduction, Anne. And I'm so delighted to be a part of this panel and really honored to meet all of you. It's the curriculum that has been developed is really focusing on the prevention of gender bias and the integration of this into secondary schools with a particular consideration here in the context of Mumbai. So we have initially started out thinking that it would accompany the pro-social games that have been developed, which are extremely contextualized, to support teachers in actually having activities to reinforce learning and develop critical awareness. So I will be elaborating a bit more later on when we come to panel questions on how this compares with the National Education Policy 2020. So what are the features of the curriculum and what are the features in terms of its relationship with the National Education Policy 2020? And the other thing is that this is freely available resource. So it's going to be available on the Ni3 website. It's extremely cost effective and it's engaging for students. So we've really taken into consideration the diversity of the student population in the Indian context and also in the other countries where we're working with the curriculum. And thinking about how we could make the activities bring in diverse children's lived experience, their participation, their voice, their agency within the learning process. So I'll be elaborating on that a bit more when we come to some of the questions. So thank you so much, Anne, and over to you. I think you're on mute, Anne.
Much, Preeti. Yes. Okay, so we shall commence this discussion. So first of all, I will be asking everyone, according to your understanding, why is gender bias an important factor influencing gender-based violence? And I shall start with Advocate Veena, since she guided us to our research focus, which is basically how gender bias leads to gender-based violence.
Thank you very much, Anne. And I mean, it's very hopeful for us to be in such a conference and a panel discussion. And I thank you very much for having me here. I think when we talk about gender bias and gender violence, a lot of times, of course, not maybe in this context. First of all, I'm sorry I joined late, but I had to just come back from court. So one is that there is always some sense of an external happening, you know, that this is happening to someone else, this is being done by someone else. I mean, ultimately, when we talk, we're all part of that society. So when we say there is gender bias in society, there's gender bias in gender violence against women in society, we are part of that society. And like Pratna said a few minutes ago, that change has to start from all of us. And what is gender bias, or what is bias of any nature? You know, a negative opinion about somebody, a person, a community, class, caste, gender, sexuality, etc. And there is also which is, I think, which has also come through in your study, where we kind of give a role to each of these communities or people that we believe belong to a certain identity, a bias or a prejudice based on an identity. I mean, for example, so therefore, when that bias exists, for example, if I'm working in an office and I have a colleague who I think is not a very smart lawyer, then what kind of work I give her, how I will analyze her work, how I will critique her work, will always depend on what perception I have of her. And that is that bias, and that ultimately will result in a hostile work environment for her, or for that, or some kind of violence in that sense. So therefore, I think when we had that discussion, Pratna, me and Banu, that we said, okay, we're constantly looking at, I mean, if you see, women's movement has been working on violence against women for a very, very long time, especially, I mean, post-independence, starting with the case of, I mean, Mathura, etc. And when you see images of the 80s, 70s women's movement, you will see when women were talking about domestic violence, rape, dowry, harassment, images. Even now, when we talk of violence and when we talk of images, we want to see women who are brutalized, women who are burnt, women who are beaten. Somewhere for us, the understanding of violence comes from these very extreme images. I mean, even for me as a lawyer, when I go to court, I always say, give me a woman who's beaten, who's bruised, and who's whatever, I'll get her justice. But get me a woman who's very, put together, etc., and looks very dignified, then it becomes very difficult for me to get justice for her, because there's a certain perception. So it is that kind of, so therefore what happens when we have a typical role play for roles is assigned to certain kind of people, the kind of work that you need to do. Now, whenever you move away from this norm, or this constructed norm, or this constructed role, then that obviously leads to that kind of violence. I think it was also seen in that YouTube video that you sent me. So therefore, somewhere this prejudice and bias becomes the basis on which is what we see. The prejudice and bias in itself is violence, and so therefore you need to address that. Like, for example, tomorrow when these children grow up and, they've seen someone hitting someone else, or they believe that a woman's place is in the kitchen, the woman's place is of primarily of giving care, And anytime she goes beyond this or she refuses to do any of this role, then obviously there will be a resistance and a violence to say, why aren't you doing this? So constantly, instead of always focusing on the violence, on that extreme expression of that bias and violence, I think somewhere we felt that we need to address that root also. And that since you're working with children and you are working with adolescents, it's very, very essential to make that change in each of us. And
Thank you so much, Veena ma'am. Prachi ma'am, if you could answer the same question.
Thank you, Anne, and hello, everyone. Basically, I think that there is a biological difference between boys and girls by birth, which we know, everyone. But the patriarchy and the traditions have bred that men are dominant, and that's why the things happen among the girls also from the mindset, from the childhood, that my brother is really dominant or my father is great than me. I don't have the capacity to fight or many things. So I think that these things promotes the gender biasness among the girl and child from childhood itself. So we have to work on we have to just nurture the parents also, or the students or the boys also, that your sister is a human being. She is not only a girl. And when we will move towards this type of, we can say, the thoughts among the girls or thoughts among the boys, then these things will prevent all type of gender bias violences. Instead of working after happening any incident, we have to, from childhood, we have to give such type of thought that you both are equal, and not equal, but you both are human beings. So these things are going to help to prevent the gender bias violence. And gender bias is there. According to me, up to some extent, we have to accept that boys and girls, biologically, some differences are there. So we can't say that they are equal in all sense, but accept the fact, though some differences are there, you both are born as a human being. So what the facilities will be there for humans, it should be, the girl also should be facilitated with that kind of perception. So these things will actually help to prevent the gender bias violence, according to me.
Yes, absolutely. Our basic aim is for early interventions as much as possible. Now I will ask Vandita the same question. According to your understanding, why is gender bias an important factor influencing gender-based violence?
Thanks for that question. And I think both Veena ma'am and Prachi ma'am have already added quite a bit. I'm just going to add a couple of smaller points. I think essentially gender is a social construct, right? It is something that we create to navigate the world. And then we prefit certain roles of what different genders should perform for society to function in a certain way. Also recognizing here that gender does exist beyond a binary. For me to think about why is it so important to address gender biases, to address gender-based violence, it comes down to how we perpetuate and create rape culture. So I'm going to invite anyone listening in to think about small things like when you talk about women being paid lesser, or when like when a boy in a classroom teases a girl and the first response everyone has is he likes you. And these are different stereotypes and ways of thinking, mental models that we are taught as young kids are ways to navigate gendered relationships. So we learn things like, we start treating certain behaviors which should be seen as abuse as normal or as liking. We start seeing certain practices as fair and okay. So if I'm being paid less, it's fine. There's a rape culture pyramid that beautifully explains this, where we start by normalizing these gender differences and these gender biases. And when you do that, right, when you pay me lesser, what you're also doing is that you're reducing my financial capacity, which means you're reducing my power in a certain situation. when my family stops me from going out after 7 p.m. instead of stopping my brother, what you are telling my brother is that if there is ever an unsafe situation for me as a woman, the solution to that is to restrict me from that space rather than to make the space safer. And these biases over time lead to other behaviors like victim blaming. So if I'm out at 8 p.m. and I face sexual harassment, that's my problem. It's the idea of who's a good victim as well. It also creates a certain power differential in the minds of men, where you are taught that your role in society is also to keep women in line. And you do that through certain things like my partner does all the cooking, does all the cleaning because it's just something I can't do. And so much of what they hear is, why would you be doing that, right? Or why isn't she doing more of it? And you also teach these ideas of toxic masculinity through this. And all of this, in my opinion, reaches a point where gender-based violence happens. It doesn't happen in a silos or in a vacuum. It happens when on a day-to-day basis, we normalize these behaviors and we create a power system where men are, one, forced to exert more power, and also over time, men do exert more power and they see sex and sexual violence as a way to exert dominance and not as a consensual engagement that can be of pleasure to both parties. And I think that's where the issue arises. And I'm, of course, just talking about sexual violence, but even domestic violence and other forms of violence.
Thank you, Vandita. I'll come back to Veena ma'am because she raised her hand. She wanted to.
Just a quick intervention because Prachi started with the biological difference. All of us are different. You and me are different. Just because we're women, we're not same. But what we all believe is the statement that we believe in is that different but equal. And even today when we say physical strength someone has, or maybe men are more muscular or whatever, have physical strength, and therefore that makes a woman weaker. It's because society is constructed from a male point of view. If today I say that no, it's the mind that is stronger than the muscle, then that's that change. So I just wanted to bring in that if we're starting with that, everyone's different, we're different, but we're equal. That's all I want.
That's why we are human beings. That thing should come with that, and we are equal. As a human being, we are equal.
Thank you so much. Now, the next question I'll be directing to Preeti. As our in-house lead for curriculum development, how do you think the deliverables from research like curriculum and the video game connect with policy? To what extent is it important for these deliverables to be implemented as policy as well as policy to be informed by studies like ours?
Thank you so much, Anne, for your question. And it's a really important one. When we're looking at any initiative, it's important to consider it in light of what's there and the policies that are shaping current practice. There are two parts to your question, so I'll just go with each part, if that's okay. Yeah. So basically, if we look at the National Education Policy 2020, there are certain things, like I'll just flag up 4 things that come out really strongly. So there's this huge emphasis on equity, inclusion, community participation, gender equality, sustainable human development, creative pedagogical approaches. So the curriculum that we have developed with Ni3 and the pro-social gains, they are really embedded in these values. So they're shaped by principles of social justice. And they're really aligned with the values about developing innovative strategies that enable and foster, a sustainable development for children and young people that enables them to participate in society in a way that empowers them. Like if we look at something, I think in the previous panel, there was Joyce ma'am and Sunita ma'am, 2 really experienced educators, both working in very different schools, who very powerfully spoke from their different contexts about the importance of participation of children, their voice, their visibility, differences between them. And something that this curriculum really does is it focuses on the rights of participation of children, even connected to UNCRC Article 12, which talks about that. So both Sunita ma'am and, Joyce ma'am, they spoke very eloquently and passionately about the silencing of children, about the fact that at different layers of society, there isn't an acknowledgement of what their needs are. So we're talking about social change, we're talking about structural change. So what this curriculum does is it really is centered around the voice, the visibility and agency of children, and it's focusing on doing it in a very cost effective manner. So the investment is around teacher education, the investment that and I think this also really resonates with what Joyce ma'am was saying, because she was saying, if you want to work on gender bias, it's not just enough to take in an intervention. You really need to think about the attitudes that teachers also bring. So we need a lot of investment around teacher education. So by keeping these activities cost effective, it opens the space aligned with NEP 2020 to really consider how can we bring this to life through teacher education development as well. The other thing that is aligned between the curriculum is that there's a huge focus in the NEP 2020 on skills development, skills courses, vocational education, and performative evaluations. So not just having exams. So what this curriculum offers and what the pro-social games offer, they offer a space and an avenue and a strategy and an approach to really embed that skills development in connection with the lived experiences of young people, in order to bring about social change, in order to address issues of gender bias. So that is another aspect that's really rooted in this curriculum. Then the final thing that I want to bring about, just highlight, and this is just the first part where you asked me, what is the connection between policy and this aspect? Is the support and scale effective community-based interventions that the NEP mentions. So over here, what we are drawing, and we are using interdisciplinary youth-centered approaches, focusing on critical pedagogy, using creative arts, using, ecological systems focus. So thinking about the child within an ecosystem of many layers. So we're thinking about the visibility, the agency of the child. It's in functioning in an ecosystem that has many layers, where the child may be visible within the home, depending, but at certain macro meso levels, there will not be that. Where is the child's voice in those circumstances? So it's really about amplifying that. It's really about making that connection to lived experience, drawing that in through creative approaches. We use drama, we use, Pratna and Banu and I have been working on this. Like, I will write something, share it with them, they'll feedback on it. And it's been a very iterative, collaborative process. So we've really focused together on trying to make it as inclusive and participatory for diverse children, and really engage them, like even in terms of, I'm a trained therapist, so I've been putting in integrative therapeutic approaches as well with creative arts aspects. So this, I think, really, creates a foundation. And if there's anything further that you would like to ask about it, I can go on about it for ages. I'm very passionate about it. And so, just please feel free to let me know if there's a particular aspect of it that you want me to elaborate on. And then when I just want to quickly come to the second part of your question, and where you was asking me, like, does it really need to be a part of policy, or does it inform policy? I think that's such an important question. In my limited experience, I feel there can't be such a thing as perfect policy. I think perfect policy is just not implementable. Yet policy is so important in terms of giving us that framework, in terms of giving us that validation to be able to take forward certain things and scale them up and give them legitimacy. So it helps to legitimize certain ways of working and strengthens that kind of rooting of it. But there will always be something that's excluded or some considerations that are not quite there. So in my understanding, it's really important to take into consideration the when you say, does research like ours actually feed into policy? I think that's so important because it's the living rights that should be shaping policy. And what we are doing in this research is we are connecting with people through participatory and collaborative approach in order to bring forward visibility and voice around living rights of children and young people, where gender-based violence prevails in their lives or in their lived reality. So it may not be happening directly, but they're conscious of what's happening in their society or their community or, so their lived experience. So there is that aspect, that connection, which is really important in terms of speaking to policy. The other thing is social justice issues, like bringing about that kind of change. Now, this is very problematic because with all good intentions, even in this panel, we are like from different disciplines. So depending on people's positions, different type of social justice issues will be prioritized. So here I feel the research really adds value because it's very culturally context specific and acknowledges diversity. So it's giving a voice from the child's or children's, I should rather say, and young people's perspectives, what should be the social justice priorities? Because if you look at the dynamics with adults, it will always be decided for them. So from if we are really engaging in listening and hearing the voices of diverse children and young people, then what comes forward in terms of prioritizing certain things that are related to their participation in issues that affect their life as social justice issues that need to be considered within the framing of policy. And then there's the articulation of it. Even amongst our group, we are speaking in different styles from different places, even maybe having different languages, So I think the issue of translation into policy, because we are coming from non-government kind of routing, though liaising with stakeholders within the government system. So how does it translate? How do we communicate from like a child or young person's perspective? Like Joyce ma'am, she really touched me, the way she was speaking about her experience of teaching, it really moved me a lot, like what she was talking about her relationships with the children and young people. So how does those things that she prioritized get translated through the research process into, policy? So that communication, that translation is really important. So it's definitely a two-way process, and it's an ongoing process. It's something that constantly has to push for that. It's in a struggle, an iterative struggle, but a very worthwhile one. It's like Pratna said in the beginning, if it leaves you with hope, then it's also done its work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So again, taking forward from what Joyce ma'am had said, that we have seen that children were given a voice even at school level through our survey, and it helped them vent anonymously and had an impact that was seen by the adults around them. Further, there have been programs that have sensitized children about what constitutes violence and abuse, yet when organizations approach it, we do it from the higher end of the violence spectrum, which Veena had elaborated upon. And a social engineering exercise like our video game highlights the subtle abuses that may eventually lead to bigger abuses. So this question is to Prachi ma'am. How do we sensitize the students by bringing in awareness and reflecting on insights into subtle abuses? An example is the Maharashtra government was recently lauded for reversed gender roles being taught in the new SSC textbooks. What are your thoughts on what more can be done? Ma'am, you're on mute.
Yeah. So inside the school or in the classroom, discrimination never happens. The discrimination happens mostly in the families or in the societies. So that's why we have put the different type of examples in the textbook, that what type of households that girl should do and the boy should do. Then these are the vice versa, because we are humans, so everyone should work for themselves. It is not think that I have to work for my mother, I have to work for my mother. That is a different thing. But first, being as a human, you have or you need many things. So if you need many things, then you have to fulfill your own needs. So that's why that is a thought behind that particular chapter which we have. And to sensitize again the girls and boys, and not only girls and boys, but to the parents also, while assigning the jobs or while dividing the some type of household works, just try to give each and everything to each and everyone. For I will say not only the girl child or the boy child, but for the parents also. Sometimes the father has to do something, then mother, because that are the things that students are observing from the childhood. And especially in the school, we can say that some things they always see or observe that the main teachers are doing, maybe on the ground or on the playground, or suppose handling the students or handling the crowd. The main teachers are at the front side, and the females are at the back side. We always observe such things on the ground or in the school premises. So we have to avoid such things and such scenarios. We have to give the vice versa rules to each and everyone. Or the boy head is always a boy head who controls the crowd. And every time teacher used to say, "Hi, just Amit, come forward and just control the class." So we have to, these are the observation, and through these observation, always girl child feels that I can't do this, or she never gets chance to do such type of things. Or at home also, suppose mother always used to say, just take care of your sister. So these are the very small sentences, but very make impact on the girl child. So that's why through curriculum, not only through curriculum, but through creating such scenarios purposefully, that on ground, female teacher is handling the crowd, or the girl head is handling the students, or while they are doing some assembly, during the assembly, such things we have to create the scenarios purposely, and then that observations will change the mindset of the girl child as well as the boys.
Thank you, Prashina. So the next question, like Preeti will be asking Vandita. You're on mute.
So do I say Vandita, ma'am?
Please don't.
Okay. So Vandita, given your background in law, public policy, and running a social enterprise, how do you perceive the relationship between protectionist and gender sensitive approaches to lawmaking? So that's one part of our question. Should I just stay with that first, or say the second part as well? What would you like?
You could tell me the second part as well.
Thank you. So the second part is, what may help to facilitate the translation of gender empowering approaches into helpful laws?
Okay, thank you. So since I heard that question, it's a question that's honestly been very close to my heart. And I won't say that I have an answer to it, because I don't think we do. It's an evolving practice and we're all fairly learning together, right? I think to answer the first part of the question, the law in itself is very patriarchal. It's made by men. I'll give you an example that's non-law, right? If you go into any office, they have glass stairs. If I'm wearing a skirt, you can look up my skirt. It's such a small thing, right? It's such a small design thing, but it shows you that that office was designed for men. And that's the thing with laws as well. While the law may say it protects women, it is designed by men and for men, because it's designed to keep women in control. It's designed to keep women protected, but it's not designed to empower women. It's not designed to empower survivors. And I think that's where the law fails, right? It's often very protectionist. It's often very, I would say, insensitive and re-traumatizing. When I think about laws around gender-based violence, the law and the associated processes with the law, right, are often very re-traumatizing and re-victimizing for the survivor. From the kind of medical tests you have to do, to the kind of questioning you undergo, to the kind of arguments that are made in court, right? The fact that arguments about my honor, my past sexual history, or my sexual conduct in general can even be a question that arises when you're interrogating me should blatantly not be allowed. In so many judgments we will read as well, where judges make equivalence between a woman and a goddess, or between a woman and honor. But my honor does not, I'll pick a popular phrase, it does not lie in my body, right? And the fact that you constantly conflate honor and dignity with my body rather than with me as a person, without allowing for me to retain my agency, it's just what continues to create this cycle of oppression and violence, because you're still only focused on protection and you're only focused on keeping me inside. You're not focused on ensuring that I have the same rights as a man would have. So I think that's where the protectionist aspect of law comes in. I would also say this not to be biologically essentialist, but I do think you need more representation in lawmaking, right? How is a panel of 20 men deciding what abortion laws I need? Or how is a panel of 15 men deciding what are the sort of, should you pay caregivers at home, right? Like if I think about it, that I don't know a single woman who does not work. Like we all do work in some capacity or the other. So who are making these laws? Who are engaging with these laws? It's mostly men in positions of power. There is such little political representation, such little legal representation. And I don't want to say that it's only women who can make these laws, but definitely more feminist, like I would say people who align with feminist jurisprudence practices, be it men, but I do think a certain amount of representation is helpful. There are some things you just can't put into words till you've not experienced it yourself. So I think that for me is in terms of the protectionist aspect of the law. When I think about where the law needs to move towards to really be able to bring these values to life, we'll just introduce the idea of feminist justice, right? We do a lot of work on feminist justice where there are two aspects to it for me. One is the prevention of sexual violence itself. It is asking yourself the question that are you solving for the cause or are you solving for the consequence? And that's why I have always loved Ni3's work, because you have to address those sort of biases before it reaches to a stage of violence. So that's one aspect of it. And then the second aspect of it for me is, how do you make the process of seeking justice in itself a transformative tool for the survivor? How can that process in itself be empowering, right? And that's the question law needs to answer. So I don't have a prescription for what the law should look like, but to me, I know that the law should live up to this ideal that I have. It should make space for my agency. It should make space for my demands. Even small things like judges and officers saying things like, why are you complaining after 10 years? I faced sexual harassment at my first workplace years back. I'm 27 now. I think I was like 18 or 19 then. I've not made a complaint till date. And I don't know if I will ever make a complaint, right? But why do I not have the agency to be able to at least raise my voice later? The very fact that defamation laws in the country are used to silence survivors. So it's not just about the law that is there to protect survivors and to give us some sort of rights, but it's also allied laws that do not help us or that work against us. And that's why when you look at an overhaul of like legal systems, it has to be systemic. It can't just be making one law for survivors and then not touching the other laws at all. What about like inheritance laws? What about adoption laws? What about marriage laws? I have a client who's not been able to get like a divorce for like 10 years now. And that happens because of whatever reasons, because the man is more powerful. There are other systemic issues in play. So I think you need to relook at the law from a feminist perspective and not just look at one law or changing one clause. That sort of piecemeal effort never works. Yeah, that's it. It's just something I feel really strongly about, as you all can see.
Thank you so much, Vandita. And you wanted to say, thank you so much. Thank you. Annie, you wanted to say something?
Yes, so I will be like for the next, because we are running out of time. We had like a long list of questions, but we'll be cutting short on those. I think we'll end with Advocate Veena, and we'll ask. So my last question to her was, as a lawyer, what do you think is missing in the last mile delivery of by service providers, such as even lawyers or the police or the protection officers or the judiciary, like how Vandita was talking about the judgment that comes with at that level. So in terms of sensitization to implement the laws made for women, while we have a lot of laws, like even when the DV law was made, it was made with a lot of debate and understanding and feminist perspectives at that point in time. But it looks good on paper, but its implementation is always lagging. So what is it that what do you think is missing, and what do you think we can do to change?
I think this is a very vibrant discussion. I was just reading what Nishit also has said. I think in the comments, I think one should read it. It's quite interesting. And Vandita has made my job very easy, very well articulated on law and what the law should be. And like, for example, I mean, the whole concept of law even today is very, very protectionist. Even for example, the Domestic Violence Act or the Sexual Harassment law, etc. I mean, very, very recently, we all talked about State of Goa versus the Tarun Tejpal case, where it was held. I mean, whatever the final judgment that the court may have arrived at, while we have very many laws which say that past history is not relevant, this is not relevant, that is not relevant, the manner in which the case proceeds, the kind of questions that you're asked, that itself becomes the trauma. And you see the biases that are there, gender biases that are there in the judge, in the system, in the police itself. So, I mean, I think that's, so it continues to be so. And judges and police and protection officers, etc., are not out of our society or away from it. They're part of this society, and so therefore they come to the system with the same biases that all of us have. I mean, in India today, I mean, for example, we say, okay, there are all these laws that women have. Now, what is the kind of lawmaking that in India we do? Oh, there's domestic violence. Let's bring in something to, to protect women from domestic violence. Oh, there's sexual harassment. Oh, let's bring in laws to protect women from sexual harassment. There's sexual assault. So there's always the law reacts to violence. Okay, and the law, so that in itself is extremely protectionist. What we need to do is talk about positive rights for women. Till today, like Vandita was saying, till today we don't have a right to matrimonial property. So unless you give positive right, unless you give a wife, the wife only has a right to reside in the house. Okay, so so that will also be countered with something else, etc. Unless we give positive rights to women, such as a right to property in matrimonial law. After 25 years of marriage, women walk away with 500 rupees maintenance. So why will I not abuse a woman who anyway has no rights, either in the system or in the law? We still our entire law is still based, the whole law of maintenance is also based merely on subsistence allowance. It's a charity that the man gives to the woman. It is not a concrete right. So we have to start talking about positive rights of women, and not merely in situations of violence. If I have a right as an individual, if I have a right as a citizen, if I have a right as a daughter, if I have a right as a wife, then obviously those rights will translate to being to empowering me. Empowerment doesn't come after I'm violated alone. So therefore, there we need to relook at our approach to law and our own as women's movement, as feminists, as to what is it that we are asking, and we must move towards asking for those positive rights. So unless you have that, then of course you'll continue to have these kind of judgments, judges and police and protection officers. For example, the domestic violence. And the second thing is that, see, you make cosmetic changes. The state does cosmetic changes. I mean, for example, the whole Shakti bill that was recently discussed by the Maharashtra government. Now that bill comes from from a position of wanting to stop violence against women, death penalty to this, death penalty to that, etc. And, want to win brownie points in that sense. So while I appreciate the fact that you want to stop that violence, but that in itself also comes from a very protectionist point of view. I mean, violence against women cannot be dealt with violence against, the state perpetuating violence by way of death penalty. The idea is not severity of punishment. The idea is consistency of punishment. So if I believe, one, that law empowers me, and two, that law will work, whether I see, the fact that, being in jail for 7 years or 8 years is not an easy thing for anybody. But the problem is whether it is death penalty or 7 years, if I know that I can get away, why will I stop the violence? So it's not that severity that matters. See the language of law till today. I mean, post the Delhi rape case, when Verma Committee report was came out and changes came in the Criminal Law Amendment Bill in 2013, even today we have in our statute books outraging of modesty. And that's, I think, what Vandita spoke about, that it's all embodied in my physical body, that modesty, whatever, purity, and all of those notions. So I think the last mile delivery I can't even think of the last mile delivery, because the first mile hasn't happened at all. So one is that the language of law has to change, the law itself has to change. Our approach to asking for changes has to be redefined. And then, of course, we've been doing sensitization programs for very many years. Judges sensitization program, police sensitization programs, the number of ones that I have done and I continue to do, everybody picks up the language very fast. And then you know how to use that language. So in front of me, obviously they'll use very politically correct language. But has that language really seeped into our minds? That, I think, is where the Ni3 project, I think, makes that impact of catching them very young and, changing those notions. I hope it is as effective as I think it would be. And it's extremely nice that you've managed to get the government's go ahead on that. And I think that change has to come from there. Each one of us, as to how we behave and how it's not even a question of how do we, what do we teach our children? What is it that we live as examples in our lives? For example, if my sister is abused, I'll tell her, hey, just kind of manage. It's okay. Or if my brother is beating my sister-in-law, then I'm going to say, no, yeah, she's lying. We have to, our lives also, we have to, for ourselves, internalize that feminist thought, feminist jurisprudence, feminist belief that we have. You don't believe in marriage, you don't want to be married. Do we have that space to be, to say that, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is, my life will be led in a feminist way. I can't say that there is no violence and yell and scream at somebody in my office, and not practice that that sense of equality that I believe in. And I think with that changes within ourselves and the efforts of groups such as Ni3, One Future Collective, etc., all of our work, I do hope that change will happen. And I don't think it's not happened. The fact that we all of us are sitting together talking about this, and like today, for example, you're talking about gender bias. and today we're also talking about gender fluidity. I mean, forget violence, bias, etc. How do we fix gender on somebody? Do we have the right to fix it? Do people have the right to decide it? So conversation always changes. And we need to also keep ourselves abreast of that. And unless we do that, I think we'll always be doing injustice to another community or set of people. So we have a duty and responsibility to practice that equality that we believe.
I just want to add last one point in one line. When you are working or you are preparing a game for the students, as well, you have to at least 5% curriculum should be for the parents. Otherwise, students will learn many things, but when they will go at home, then parents will again dominate them. So I think at least 5% stress should be there on for the parents, how parents will handle or they will remove such type of gender biasness at home.
And I'm sorry, I think one very important point Nishit is making again and again, and I think it's very, very important and very close to my heart too, is that what are the religious, I mean, what is the role for women and how does religion construct women? And that's also very important for us to look at. I mean, I don't know if Nishit wants to add or he's allowed to add. And that, that we need to break those two. I mean, religion is ultimately, to me, a patriarchal construct and a patriarchal institution in itself. So obviously, it will speak the patriarchal language. I mean, I don't know any religion that has been started by a woman that all of us follow, recognize, etc. So notions of that will come in. So I think it's very difficult when we say we believe in a certain when we believe in a certain certain principles of feminism, whatever. I don't want to bracket it into ideology, whatever that it is. In certain principles, then for us to practice it is very, very important, and it is also very difficult because we have to then be ready to break all of these norms, societal norms, religious norms, institutional norms. And I think we must also somewhere lead by example. Thanks, Nishit, for that.
Thank you so much, Veena ma'am and Prachi ma'am. Because of the time crunch, we will be not going into the further questions. And on that note, I would like to thank the panelists for their expert insights. We recognize that there are many dimensions and angles to be taken into consideration. The panel has illuminated these aspects from their particular locations in this gender-biased exploration of new possibilities. Thank you again to the panelists for taking their time out. Prachi Sathe, Advocate Veena Gowda, Vandita Morarka, as well as Dr. Preeti Chopra. Thank you so much for being a part of our panel today. So our next item is our video game. I will be playing a short clip. So the basic storyline of the video game was created using data collected from qualitative research. And I personally could see many of the lived experiences of the women we interviewed. The game, titled Anju, runs for 2 hours. The game is to be played by school students as part of their curriculum over a period of 5 days. Over 5 levels, this video game on each level covers certain objectives and is a social engineering exercise toward changing attitudes of school students to being more egalitarian and empathetic to women's realities. The audio is in Hindi and we have provided an option to switch between Hindi and English subtitles. This excerpt is from the first chapter of the video game where the player interacts with the mother and the grandmother, where they keep talking about the so-called place of women. Over the course of the game, the narrative changes towards empathy. Without much ado,
अंजू, दादी को चाय चाहिए। मैंने वहां पर ट्रे लगा दी है, प्लीज उनके पास ले जाओ और इस बार कुछ गिराना मत।
ठीक है।
थैंक यू।
क्या मैं बाद में जाकर खेल सकती हूँ?
नहीं, मुझे तुम्हारी यहाँ जरूरत है। जल्दी जाओ अंजू।
दादी, मुझे भूख लगी है। खाने में कितना समय लगेगा?
जल्द ही हो जाएगा, लेकिन मैं तुम्हारी मम्मी से कुछ स्नैक्स बनाने को बोलती हूँ। देखो, तुम्हारी बहन तुम्हारे लिए चाय लाई है।
आपकी चाय मेरे पास है दादी।
बढ़िया, थैंक यू। ये लो अमन। अंजू, तुम्हारे पास करने के लिए कुछ नहीं है क्या? तुम्हें अपनी मम्मी की मदद करनी चाहिए।
मैं रुककर बात क्यों नहीं कर सकती?
एक अच्छी लड़की को हमेशा पहले अपने परिवार की मदद करनी चाहिए। जाओ अपनी मम्मी की मदद करो बेटा।
स्कूल के बाद घर के कामों में हमेशा मुझसे ही क्यों मदद की उम्मीद की जाती है? अमन से क्यों नहीं? शायद मुझे मम्मी से पूछना चाहिए। वैसे भी मुझे उनके पास वापस जाना ही है।
तो तुम आ गई? इतना समय कहाँ लग गया अंजू?
सॉरी, मैं सिर्फ दादी से बात करना चाहती थी।
तुम बाद में बात कर सकती हो, पहले अपना काम खत्म करो। पहले गंदे कपड़े उठाकर धोने को डालो और फिर जाकर बाथरूम साफ करो।
मेरा घर के काम करने का बिल्कुल मन नहीं है। मैंने अभी अभी अपना होमवर्क खत्म किया है। मैं थक गई हूँ।
मैं भी, लेकिन डिनर से पहले हमें जल्दी से सफाई करनी होगी। जल्दी करो, तुम्हारे पापा घर आते ही होंगे और हम दोनों को बहुत काम खत्म करना है।
शायद मुझे मेरा काम खत्म ही कर लेना चाहिए।
और आज क्या किया? क्या तुम्हें क्रिकेट खेलने का समय मिला?
अभी तक तो नहीं, लेकिन शायद पापा जब घर आ जाएंगे तो मुझे ले जाएंगे।
चिंता मत करो, अगर तुम्हें प्रैक्टिस करना है तो मैं देखूंगी कि वो जरूर तुम्हें लेकर जाए।
यहाँ कुछ गंदे कपड़े हैं उठाने के लिए। मुझे इसे बास्केट तक ले जाना चाहिए। मुझे बाथरूम साफ करना बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं। ठीक है, मेरा सारा काम खत्म हो गया। मम्मी ने मुझे वापस आकर मदद करने के लिए कहा था, पर ये ठीक नहीं है। मम्मी अमन को मदद करने के लिए क्यों नहीं कहती? मैंने अपना काम खत्म कर लिया है। क्या आपको अभी भी मेरी मदद चाहिए?
नहीं, ठीक है, मैंने सब काम खत्म कर ही लिया है। आओ मुझसे बात करो जब तक मैं अमन का स्नैक्स बना रही हूँ। क्या तुम ठीक हो? तुम दुखी दिख रही हो।
मुझे होमवर्क खत्म करने के बाद सफाई क्यों करनी पड़ती है? और अगर अमन को काम नहीं करना है तो मुझे क्यों?
ये समझना थोड़ा मुश्किल है। ये सही नहीं है, लेकिन सब ऐसे ही है और तुम ये जानती हो। तुम्हें ये सब अपने भविष्य के लिए सीखना जरूरी है। अगर तुम्हें अच्छी पत्नी बनना है और अच्छा पति चाहिए तो तुम्हें घर का ख्याल रखना आना चाहिए। सिलाई, खाना बनाना, सफाई, ये सब बहुत जरूरी है अंजू। तुम्हें ये रोज करना होगा।
मुझे पूरा दिन घर साफ करते और खाना बनाते नहीं बिताना है। मुझे भी नौकरी करनी है।
अच्छा, सचमुच? तो तुम्हें कौन सी नौकरी चाहिए?
एक वकील।
That was a short clip of our video game play. I hope you found that interesting. With the new National Education Policy 2020 calling for disruptive technology to address issues of gender discrimination, among other things, we hope that others may also take the agenda forward. Next, we have Sunaina Wagmare, who is our Design Hub Creative Head. She has a master's in graphic design from Sir J.J. School of Arts. She is a communication and graphic designer based in Mumbai, India. She has been a part of Ni3 India since 2018, and she will take you through our design interventions.
Thank you, Anne. Hello, all. Hope you all are having a great day with some amazing presentations and panel discussions. I shall take you through the Design Hub showcase. Design Hub is a team of designers located at Ni3 Research Center, India. Yes, that's me right there. I am Sunaina Wagmare and I lead the Design Hub team. Here is my team. I share a special bond with this team as our journey first began with me being their teacher, and now they are my colleagues. Our first member of the team, Ishani Kulkarni, a communication designer who brings the perfect balance as a critic and creativity to all our design outcomes. Second member, Mehak Gupta, a communication and social designer who has been a major member of the team with her amazing way of working and making minute notes after every meeting and managing events. The youngest member of our team, Karmishta Krishna, who always surprises us with fresh ideas and methodological messaging in all her designs. Now I'm going to take you through a synergy between a design and a research as a part of a global Ni3 research center where we showcase our work in branding, visual language, video, spoken word, graphic design, and humanizing data. One of our first tasks as Design Hub lead was a rebrand of Ni3 Research Center. This project started after Global Summit 2019, and it meant to create another identity with nuances of the initial logo. The motive of the new logo was to create familiarity, versatility, at the same time present the global transnational team to present the work of the center preventing gender-based violence while creating a universal appeal. Another major project taken up by our young Design Hub team was Play, Talk, Change, a youth-led global gathering of early career researchers, game developers, and change makers standing together against gender-based violence, which held on 24th and 25th of June 2021 over a YouTube live stream. Play, Talk, Change is more than just a name. It was a goal, a hope, and an ambition condensed into three simple words. We want young change makers to indulge in serious gaming, which is play, and research, which is a talk, and to build a world free from gender-based violence, which is a change, and that's our aim. And these are few of our creatives which we made for Play Talk Change, as you must have seen on our social media. Next is a video created by Mehak and Ishani, collaborating with our other team members from Uganda and Jamaica as a part of a marketing outcomes for Play Talk Change, which reached around 500 plus views on Insta and got us a great deal of registrations and made a noise out there.
Global statistics show that 1 in 3 women face physical or sexual abuse in their lifetime.
Our research confirms that enablers of such violence include gender-based, patriarchal norms, and child marriage.
And that children and young people are too often victims of gender-based violence, such as physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, along with coercion and control.
The harsh reality is people do go through this every day, but they shouldn't have to.
So what can we do about it?
We can empower.
We can educate.
We can make a difference as each life matters.
Our collective aim is to make this statistic Ni3. The young people of Ni3 have come together to create a virtual conference called Play Talk Change. Play Talk Change is a youth-led global gathering of members from the fields of research, art and design, gaming, and social workers.
Play Talk Change is showcasing Ni3's innovative solution, research-driven pro-social computer games to build a world free of gender-based violence.
You will find podcasts, webinars, panel discussions, short films, and keynote sessions dedicated to making positive change in India, Uganda, Jamaica, and the UK.
So if you are one of those people who wants to educate themselves and make a difference, register for our free conference using the link in our bio.
Come join us and please share with your friends, parents, teachers, and peers. Let's play, talk, and change.
Be the voice of change.
So that was a glimpse from a plate of change. Sorry. And to show you another piece of showcase of our youngest team member, Karmishta, displaying her poetic writing and also performing it based on her own experience of being a girl, or rather growing up as a girl. This piece is called Swimming Through.
When I was 9, my mama always told me to stay away from the deep blue waters, to swim shallow enough so that she could watch me. She told me that I could appreciate the turquoise ripples, but from an arm's distance only, for sharks roam wildly and fiercely, inhabiting the oceans and gnarled corals, establishing their rugged rule by simply sensing prey and conquering flesh, like it was always theirs. She told me that I was too little to understand how extensive the ocean was, too little to understand why she kept me away from it. When I was 15, my mama began to tell me to beware of what lay under the azure skies, to explore the world below, but with my cautioned senses only. She told me that I could appreciate people I admired, but from an arm's distance only, for perpetrators roam wildly and fiercely, inhabiting public spaces in gnarled, dingy lanes, establishing their evil rule by simply catcalling prey and conquering skin, like it was always theirs. That I was big enough to understand how unsafe the world was, but too free-spirited to understand her fear of letting me go. I am 19 now. I sat my mother down, held her hands in mine, and quietly whispered to her. The eyes and the blue oceans were both beautiful, both extraordinary, that it was unfair to let sharks and perpetrators conquer bodies that didn't belong to them. I whispered to her that if the world is an oyster and the ocean is its home, it is the pearls that shine through them all.
What a lovely poet and also touching words. To show you another visual creation made by Ishani. This creation shows where does the justification of gender-based violence comes from. Why are we bystanders to this violence? Through our research, we have found the justification for gender-based violence and inaction towards stopping it really stems from gender roles and stereotypes. This graphic aims to peel back the layers and understand the progression by using a familiar Russian doll as a visual metaphor. Last but not the least, another very interesting content creation on humanizing data done by Ishani. A data visualization, meaning the representation of information in the form of chart, diagram, pictures, etc. With our kind of research, we have a lot of qualitative and quantitative data. You can see on your right side, there is a table of 42 IDI participants' attributes, data which is collected as a part of Ni3 India qualitative research. Data here includes age, education, marital status, number of kids, etc. We were wondering how do we present this or these from being just another table you flip past, and wanted to make sure a authentic representation of these tell a story, humanize the lived experiences of these ideas. The biggest visual impact is equal to most important variables and correlations. So we turned this into this, the same 42 ideas in visual form. To give you more clarity, would like to show you the key which will help you decode the data. Here, each element represents a specific information of each IDI. Example, a level of education and relation by the texture and the color background. Age of marriage, which shows represents through the hair of the women. The way uh, earrings have been worn shows the marital status, and the orientation of the face shows the income level. But the most important thing is a verified tick is in both a connect to social media technology, but also a metaphor for the legitimacy, validity of these women and their stories. They deserve to be spoken about. They represent many others like them. You will find such visualization in our reports on our website, nanin3.org. So on a closing note, I would like to share some learnings and way forward. A visual language has no boundary, whether rich or poor, literate or not. It impacts and is understood by everyone. Extensive collaboration with researchers lets a designer reach people much better, as the work together fills a contextual gaps. Designing for a social cause requires skill, of course, to best represent something, but also sensitivity and good strategy. And moving forward from here, through writing or research, design or poetry, our endeavor to make this world a gender just one and continues forever. On this note, as we are running very short of time, we'd like to take a bow on behalf of my team and thank you for being here. Before I hand it over to Pratna, I would like to show you a short film by my team about our journey at Nanin3 India over the last 4 years.
In December 2017, the Nanin3 project officially came to India, with Bhanu Verma and Pratna Patil in the lead.
As country co-directors, the two of them began Nanin3 India's journey by exploring a research focus. After consulting advocate Veena Gowda and Mamta Murthy, a documentary filmmaker, the team arrived at gender bias as a leading cause to gender-based violence in India. In April 2018, Rukmini Banerjee joined as a research fellow, who then very soon became India's pivotal researcher. Her time at Ni3 began with a 2-week-long training at the University of Huddersfield in the UK.
We attempted to trace gender-related policy development as a glimpse into the status of women in our country. Our team, along with Dr. Agata Dibowska, WP6 co-lead, prepared a situational analysis using quantitative studies and official reports to design a timeline of India's most important legislation addressing gender-based violence over the years since independence.
The team started getting acclimated to all the work packages set by the headquarters when they realized they need a media team. Ma'am thought, who better than her colleague and friend Sunaina Wagmare from ISTI, accompanied by one of her sincere students, Mehak Gupta. And with that, the media gathering team of India was formed. With lots of tech training, ideation meetings and their design shops, social media suddenly got a creative funk.
Rukmini, Bhanu and Pratna worked tirelessly with Triune Consultancy Services to conduct fieldwork for India's qualitative research. By October 2018, We had conducted 42 in-depth interviews with women and 7 focus group discussions with men over a period of 2 weeks. Anne Paniker joined as a research assistant. She came with field experiences of directly dealing with law through litigation and management of events. She adapted to her role very quickly. As a means of enhancing the center's engagement with the community, the team conducted various workshops and talks inviting experts to share their knowledge of gender issues and their intersection across various subjects.
Our journey with the government of Maharashtra began in October 2018 when Bhanu and Pratna reached out to government officials from the education department. In a meeting with the authorities, we were advised to connect with Mrs. Prachi Sathe, then an officer on special duty with the Ministry of Education, now an independent academic counselor, and Miss Mariola Fernandez, whose overwhelming interest and support in our project enabled us to onboard the Education Ministry. We had meetings and presentations with officials which finally led to signing of a Memorandum of Understanding with the Maharashtra government in February 2019. The MOU helped in approaching schools and collaborating with them to conduct our quantitative surveys and future game trials.
Mid-2019 was when the global team met collectively for the very first time in person. They gathered in Mumbai, India for work, fun and collaboration, aka the summit. It was productive and exciting, busy and exhilarating, celebratory and reflective. Team members from UK, Uganda and Jamaica got a teeny tiny taste of India and the famed Indian hospitality. The Ni3 Games team got first-hand experience of the Indian school setting to help them design the India game accurately. A special mention for the long-planned business engagement dinner with wine, dine, and networking among delegates and top business professionals of Mumbai. On the last night of the summit, we celebrated the success of our work and collaboration with a team dinner that brought everyone together onto the dance floor for some desi moves.
You must have noticed 2 new faces in all the summit photos. These 2 faces represent the creative boom in our team, Ishani Kulkarni and Karmesha Krishna. Mid-2019, as the team began to synthesize their research findings, Ishani came on board as Ni3's first research and design intern. After helping the team with the summit in her first month, she began contributing to data visualization and helped the team translate their research into creatives for social media. Also amongst the summit planning group were a bunch of student volunteers from ISTI, of whom the bright and talented Karmesha continued a creative relationship with us.
The summit was also a time when Professor Adele Jones realized that we had untapped design potential here in India. She thought, why don't we make this a design hub and actualize the synergy between research and design? And that's what happened. Slowly and steadily, major shifts were made, beginning with a logo redesign and rebranding of Ni3 itself that reflected this new synergy.
Midway through 2020, the Design Hub saw an opportunity to sensitize young designers and artists towards gender-based violence, which was carried out through a poster design competition. The month of September saw over a dozen virtual poster submissions on various themes including patriarchy, gender stereotypes, and the impact of COVID on women. Having the Ni3 Purple as a mandatory design guideline for the submissions, the posters brought in a unique identity of Ni3 in them. Towards the end of 2019, we, the country directors, the researchers, the designers, the volunteers, and the interns focused all of our efforts towards the administration of quantitative research. And by December, the team had conducted over 8,000 surveys across 20 schools in suburban Bombay in 4 languages. The theme for the conference this year was Constitutional Principles in 21st Century India, Visions for Emancipation. The Ni3 team made a short 12-minute presentation on perpetuating gender bias, deprivation of women's rights as equal citizens, with a focus on bystander intervention.
This was well appreciated and received a question on whether we came across cases in our research pertaining to love marriages and how does the bystander theory play out there. The research fellows from all 4 countries, Rukmini from India, Carol from Jamaica, Esther from Uganda, and Jill from the UK, delivered a symposium together on the role of childhood abuse in the lives of adult survivors of different forms of gender-based violence, perspectives from Jamaica, India, Uganda, and the UK. They presented the findings of ongoing research as a public engagement strategy and to encourage collaboration across regions and cultures. This conference was an amazing opportunity to understand the interconnectedness of GBV experiences globally. It was also the last physical conference we participated in before the COVID pandemic triggered a worldwide lockdown, so it holds a special place in all our hearts. Our research fellow Rukmini and senior research assistant Anne spoke at the same conference again in 2021. Their presentation explored how the team had applied an autoethnographic research methodology as part of undertaking our large-scale quantitative survey, allowing their own personal experiences to inform a reflexive data collection methodology. This virtual conference gave us the opportunity to engage with researchers from around the world, from the comfort of our homes. The presentation has also contributed to an academic paper written by Professor Miller and Xiaomin Chen on the topic of access experiences of research teams to schools and comparing the approaches taken by different countries to participate in the psychosocial surveys. At the last collaborative conference presentation from the India team before the closure of our project, we were both excited and emotional. Anne and Rukmini presented on some of the findings of the qualitative research focusing on the issue of older women's abuse in India. Alongside, Gauri presented on the very pertinent topic of domestic violence representations in the news media during the COVID lockdown in India. As a unique conference deeply committed to highlight domestic violence as a very serious form of gender-based violence, our team presented amongst prolific academics and activists who shared the same interest and gusto of our team, thus enabling us to learn and nuance our future understanding of the issue. The qualitative research that was conducted in late 2018 brought forward data that overwhelmingly supported the research focus that gender bias leads to gender-based violence. The research team coded the data and some important themes emerged, which then culminated into a report. That report was succinctly summarized by the way of the executive summary. While going through the data, the research team and the media gathering team worked together to come out with visualizations that bring to life the lived experiences of the women in the study. The report delves into the translation of gender bias into violence, then talks about the role of marriage, family, and prescribed gender roles, and finally espouses how women's experiences are invalidated. The report also gives the research team's recommendations on action points.
Seeing the involvement of young people in the 2019 summit, Adele Jones proposed that we hold another similar conference held entirely by young people. And following that, in 2020, a young team was mobilized to organize, create, and plan a global virtual conference. A special mention to the marketing efforts of 2 interns, Gwyneth and Dharmit, for ensuring we invited abundant schools, colleges, and universities across the nation.
Play, Talk, Change has been planned by a talented group of young people from across our global Ni3 Research Centre team, with the support and guidance of Centre Manager Vicky Hart. They've all worked extremely hard over the past few months to bring this conference from concept to reality. Here they are to introduce themselves. We hope you'll be inspired by our work to prevent violence through video games. Together we can make a difference through play, talk, change. Enjoy.
One of the core principles of Ni3 is engaging with public discourse through policy development. After a review of literature on gender bias and our qualitative research findings, we came up with a policy brief that envisions a robust set of recommendations for the government for immediate and long-term action. Alongside, the India team supported Work Package 5 co-leads Dr. Chopra and Professor Miller in designing a curriculum which could fill the existing gaps in knowledge and awareness of the issues of gender bias and gender-based violence. With special inputs from educators and experts of the field, our curriculum complements existing provisions in Indian education to promote inclusion and well-being. With the release of the National Education Policy of 2020, the India team drafted a critical analysis of some of the issues that the new policy addressed. Simultaneously, we were looking at curricular development of government schools with a focus on gender, sexual health, and gender-based violence. This led to us publishing an opinion piece on challenging the status quo of sex education in India and how it affects young women.
The Ni3 India team started recruiting voice actors to provide voiceovers for the audio files in the pro-social video game. By May 2021, we had started rehearsals, and once the lockdown in Mumbai was partially lifted, we hit the recording studio to record the audio pieces. It was a heartening experience since we had recruited students from Teach for India schools and from some other partnerships. We would like to thank Mr. Mohandas and Vikrant especially for helping us bring life to the characters in the video game. The game currently is in its usability testing stage.
Thank you so much, everyone. Hope everybody liked the film. And I would like to hand over it to Pradna ma'am.
Thank you, Sunaina. I am speechless because I don't know what to say beyond this. It's been most overwhelming to watch this film, and I know we have shot overboard with in terms of time, but totally worth it. And I'm definitely going to watch it again, scene by scene. Beautifully done, people. What a fantastic job, Media Gathering team and the Design Hub. Fantastic. So Naina, thank you so much for taking us through that.
Thank you.
And before before we end this session, this conference completely, I would like to introduce Adele Jones. Dr. Adele Jones is a professor of social work at the UK's University of Huddersfield and founder of the Ni3 Centre, as well as an academic. She is a qualified social worker. She has provided 40 years of service to vulnerable women and children and has led research in over 23 countries. The author of numerous publications, Dr. Jones is most known for her work on preventing gender-based violence. To all of us, she is a person who's always there. As always, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Adele Jones to deliver the end note.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I tell you, this is such an honor to be closing this momentous collaboration and to have seen the review of all of the work and achievements has left me completely and utterly humbled. But let me continue with my task. And I'd like to start with a short poem about gender-based violence. It's called Learned Helplessness. They say, these clever scientist folks, that there is such a thing as learned helplessness. Cage a rat, subject it to repeated trauma until it is so tired of fighting, it will lie in the corner and take the pain, not leaving even when the door is opened. I know this to be true. This has been me, cowering in the corner, begging with imploring eyes for you to shut the door and stop confronting me with impossible choices. This poem is by an anonymous survivor of domestic violence. It gives a glimpse into the psychological trauma of gender-based violence. People often ask of women in abusive relationships, why do you stay? Why does she stay? The question carries implicit notions of victim blame and fails to hold to account the perpetrators of abuse. Furthermore, it completely writes out any consideration of the bigger picture, the societal factors such as structural oppression, gender bias, and gender inequality that cause women to remain trapped. My vision for the Ni3 project was that through our research and interventions, we would provide voice for voiceless victims and choice for the choiceless, women and children both. And through our public engagement and our agency partnerships and also our policy work, we would illuminate some of the ways to addressing some of the underlying social factors that drive gender-based violence. To unlearn learned helplessness, for us all to unlearn learned helplessness. This vision has its genesis in my own personal experiences, and I can assure you, choosing not to be abused is no choice at all. So how do you give wings to a vision? Well, anything that flies must have a base from which it launches. The base for Ni3's work is its theoretical framework. This was derived from my earlier work on child sexual abuse in 6 countries and has several strands. It acknowledges that violence against women and violence against children are inextricably linked and sit within a wider context of violence, acceptance, and its normalization. That gender-based violence is underpinned by values which position females as subservient and males dominant. These values are reinforced through structural gender inequities and through cultures. Sex is viewed often as male entitlement, and this of itself demands female acquiescence. The misuse of male power is legitimized through institutional practices and inefficient laws. Cultural values and practices can have the effect of condoning certain expressions of violence. The problem is systemic. Systems approaches are needed to tackle it. Violence against males and the abuse of boys is often minimized, to our great cost. Denial, victim blaming, and lack of empathy are pervasive. Now, it struck me very powerfully when Rukmini was talking about the research from Ni3 India, just how relevant that theoretical framework that was devised over 12 years ago is to this day. A vision must not only fly, it must land and take root. When I met the 2 people who were to become the directors of Ni3 India, its rooting was assured. I could not, though, have predicted the dedication, the creativity and skill they would apply to making the impossible happen. Conducting research on violence against women and children is so challenging as to thwart the most intrepid of social scientists. Prarthana and Banu and their incredible team were never thwarted. In fact, they have only one approach to a problem. What is the solution? With this as their mantra, they have taken the world on a distinctly Indian journey. They have revealed new insights into the victimization of Mumbai's children. They have unearthed buried stories that show how gender bias functions as an enabler of violence. They have brought to light the perspectives of men and youth, as well as women. And of women, they have searched out the voices of older women, of younger women, the middle classes, as well as the classless. They have increased our understanding of government structures, policy, and legislation. They generated the social and cultural knowledge that has assured the authenticity of our interventions. They have produced the most stunning artistic and creative work, as we have just seen, and thus maximizing the impact not only of outputs from India, but of outputs across our global team. And they are responsible for some of our most successful public engagement events. I am truly humbled by the achievements of this incredible team. And I would say one further thing, in everything that they have done, in terms of even organizing their work and their structures, they have sought to build in the empowerment of young women in their approach and processes. I am truly humbled by their achievements, and I am richer for their friendship. And so as we come to the end of this 4-year project, I must come to the conclusion that it was not my vision at all that was the catalyst for this momentous work. I was simply the mirror through which the team's own vision for gender equity was reflected back at them. This means, of course, that while the project must finish, there are no endings here. For the learning and the legacies shared today will give impetus to new pathways, and the work will continue. To the partners and the stakeholders who have walked this road with us, the discovery of so many possibilities would not have been possible without you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adele. That couldn't have been any better, with Nadia starting the session and with you sharing this end note. I think at this point, I will end because this cannot be done without one more person, Bhanu Verma. Please, I want you to share this, and I want you to take this moment to say goodbye to everyone.
So I usually am blessed with words, at will. I can express myself reasonably well most of the times. Today is not one of those times, I must say, because I'm just totally overwhelmed by the vastness of what we have together achieved as a team through 4 years of hard work and focused attention. And surprising that we never really felt that we had notched up so many lovely achievements on the way. And hence it's thanks to Sunaina, Ishani, Karmishta and Mehak for that absolutely exhilarating video catalog that you travelogue, whatever you want to call it, that you put together. It was fabulous. I don't have words to express it. Thank you very much. Prarthana, you've been incredible in your support, and thanks for every moment of it. I've enjoyed. I don't know how to express it again, but suffice to say that I think it was a match made in heavens for this project, and thanks for finding me and joining me on this 4-year journey. It was incredible. Thank you, Rukmini. Thanks for all the hours and hours of crazy focused work that you put in at One India Bulls and later from your home, and making, putting all of those evidences together to say that we have actually done incredible work in the space. And I don't have words for you again. You've just been that one quiet contributor, just pegging away at work, allowing us to blindly believe and trust you with everything that we would just pile on to you. done phenomenal justice to the role that you were hired for and more. And that's just the immediate team. I am forever grateful to the Huddersfield team. Starting with Roz, Vicky, the work package leaders, and someone who we have come to consider very highly and very close to our hearts, Dr. Adele Jones. You've been incredible in leading us, directing us, showing us the right way. When we had a question, we didn't have to think twice before sending you an SOS via WhatsApp, or insisting that we meet when you wake up today. That kind of freedom I've not experienced in my 26, 27 years of corporate experience. Thanks for giving us a flavor of that. You've been magnanimous. You've been just been a wonderful, wonderful mentor. And thanks for everything. And to the rest of all the support that we have received from all our friends that we have made on the way. There are many. I might not be able to take names, but it's been very gratifying. Thank you very, very much. And I don't have anything more to say. I'll perhaps write, document it in an email or something, but I would like to stop it right here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Bhanu. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us till the end. This journey couldn't have been complete without all your presence. And as we see that our family has only grown and it is going to keep growing. So see you soon.